The cantina erupts in laughter as Zera, the ugly Lurian girl, stumbles through the door. All eyes turn to mock her, but one pair belongs to a human who sees beyond her appearance. Brian Turner, Earth's diplomat on Nexus Prime, watches the cruel scene unfold, his fists clenching at the injustice. Zera's short stature and dull, asymmetrical features stand out among the willowy Lurians crowding the bar. Their iridescent skin shimmers under the harsh station lights, multifaceted eyes glinting with malice as they jeer at their outcast kin. Brian's throat tightens, recognizing the universal language of bullying. "Look at the freak," a tall Lurian male shouts, his companions hooting in agreement. "Did your mother mate with a Krelthax?" Brian rises from his seat, diplomacy warring with his instinct to intervene. As he steps forward, the cantina screens flicker to life with an emergency broadcast. The laughter dies instantly. "Attention all station residents," a grave voice announces. "Earth has fallen under attack by the Krelthax Empire. Their fleet approaches Nexus Prime. All humans are advised to seek immediate shelter." Chaos erupts. Aliens of various species rush for exits, some casting fearful glances at Brian. The Lurians who moments ago tormented Zera now look at the human with a mixture of pity and suspicion. Brian's mind races. Earth attacked? The Krelthax coming here? He needs to warn someone, to escape, to do something. But how? A small hand grasps his arm. It's Zera, her eyes wide with an emotion Brian can't quite place. "I can help you," she whispers, her voice barely audible above the panicked crowd. "I know ways off this station no one else does." Before Brian can respond, the cantina doors slam open. Lurian security forces pour in, their leader a familiar face, one of Zera's tormentors from earlier. "All humans must come with us for their own protection," he announces, but the glint in his eye suggests other motives. Brian hesitates, torn between trusting the authorities and the outcast offering aid. Zera tugs his arm urgently. "Please," she pleads, "I owe you for your kindness. Let me repay it." In that moment, Brian makes a choice that will alter the course of interstellar history. He nods to Zera and allows her to guide him towards a hidden panel in the wall. As they slip into the station's forgotten maintenance tunnels, Brian realizes he's placing his trust, and possibly Earth's fate, in the hands of the very alien others had scorned. Zera moves with surprising grace through the narrow passages, her smaller size an advantage in the cramped space. "My differences," she explains as they hurry along, "they're not just physical. I can sense emotions, intentions. It's why I knew I could trust you." Brian's diplomatic mind whirs with the implications. An empath. Could this be the key to understanding the Krelthax? To saving Earth? Their progress is halted by the sound of heavy footsteps and shouted orders echoing through the tunnels. The Lurian security forces are in pursuit, led by those who once mocked Zera. The hunter-prey dynamic has shifted, with the outcast now the quarry. "This way," Zera whispers, pulling Brian down a side passage so narrow they have to turn sideways to pass. "There's a hangar ahead with an old shuttle. It's our only chance." As they emerge into the small, dusty hangar, Brian sees their salvation, a battered shuttle that's seen better days. It's far from state-of-the-art, but it's their ticket off Nexus Prime. The sound of approaching guards grows louder. Brian looks at Zera, seeing not an ugly alien girl, but a brave ally. Together, they face not just escape, but a mission that could reshape the galaxy. As they race to the shuttle, Brian realizes that in this moment of crisis, humanity's hope lies in the most unexpected of places, and the most unexpected of allies. The shuttle's hatch hissed open, and Brian wasted no time. He grabbed Zera's hand, pulling her inside the cramped cockpit. The sound of heavy footfalls echoed through the maintenance tunnels, growing louder with each passing second. "We need to go now," Brian exclaimed, his eyes darting across the unfamiliar control panel. Buttons, switches, and holographic displays covered every surface, their alien symbols incomprehensible to the human diplomat. Zera squeezed into the co-pilot's seat, her smaller frame an advantage in the tight space. I've never actually flown one of these," she admitted, her voice quavering. Brian's hands hovered over the controls, paralyzed by indecision. The approaching guards were moments away from discovering their hiding spot. Suddenly, Zera's eyes widened, and she placed her hand on Brian's arm. "Wait," she whispered. I can feel the shuttle." Brian watched in amazement as Zera closed her eyes, her face a mask of concentration. Her hand moved from his arm to the control panel, fingers dancing across the surface with unexpected grace. "Here," she guided Brian's hand to a specific sequence of controls. "This is the launch sequence. Quickly." Brian followed her instructions, his diplomatic training kicking in as he pushed aside his doubts and trusted his unlikely ally. The shuttle hummed to life, its ancient engines sputtering and coughing like an old Earth car on a cold morning. The hangar doors began to close, triggered by some unseen alarm. Brian gritted his teeth and pushed the throttle forward. The shuttle lurched, scraping against the narrowing gap. Sparks flew as metal ground against metal, the screeching sound drowning out the shouts of the Lurian security forces left behind. With a final bone-jarring jolt, they broke free of Nexus Prime's artificial gravity. The space station rapidly shrank behind them, becoming just another pinprick of light among the stars. Brian allowed himself a moment of relief before reality set in. "The navigation system is offline," he reported, scanning the flickering displays. "We're flying blind out here." Zera leaned forward, her eyes reflecting the starscape visible through the viewscreen. "Not blind," she corrected. "I know these stars. Set a course for Havex III. It's a mining colony, far from Nexus Prime's influence. We'll be safe there." As Brian input the coordinates Zera provided, he noticed a change coming over his companion. Zera's dull skin began to shimmer, emitting a soft, pulsating glow that seemed to ripple across her body. The effect was mesmerizing, transforming her features from merely unusual to hauntingly beautiful. "Zera, you're glowing," Brian said, unable to tear his eyes away. She ducked her head, embarrassment evident in her posture. "It's a stress response," she explained. "I can't control it." Before Brian could respond, a shrill alarm cut through the air. Red warning lights bathed the cockpit in an ominous glow. Brian's fingers flew across the controls, bringing up a sensor display that made his blood run cold. "Krelthak's warship," he announced, his voice tight, "on an intercept course." Zera's glow intensified, her fear palpable in the small cockpit. Brian's mind raced, years of military training before his diplomatic career flooding back. His eyes locked onto a dense field of asteroids directly ahead. "Hold on," he warned, grasping the controls. "This is going to get rough." The shuttle plunged into the asteroid field, chunks of rock and ice tumbling past on all sides. Brian's hands moved with practiced precision, weaving through the deadly obstacle course. Zera gripped her seat, her eyes wide with terror. "Left!" she suddenly shouted. "Bank left!" Brian complied without hesitation, narrowly avoiding a massive asteroid that seemed to materialize out of nowhere. He glanced at Zera, realization dawning. "You can sense them, can't you?" he asked. "The Krelthak's pilot?" Zera nodded, her face contorted with concentration. "His intentions, I can feel them. He's frustrated, angry." Working in tandem, Brian's piloting skills and Zera's empathic abilities allowed them to stay one step ahead of their pursuer. The Krelthak's warship, far less maneuverable than their small shuttle, struggled to navigate the treacherous field. During a particularly close call, the shuttle spun wildly, tossed by the gravitational pull of a massive asteroid. Brian instinctively reached out, steadying Zera as she was nearly thrown from her seat. Their hands touched, and for a moment, the chaos around them seemed to fade away. Brian felt a jolt, like an electric current passing between them. Zera's eyes met his, wide with surprise and something else. A connection that transcended their physical differences. The moment passed quickly, but its impact lingered, a new understanding forming between the human and the Lurian outcast. As they emerged from the asteroid field, a series of explosions rocked the shuttle. Brian fought with the controls, alarms blaring from every direction. "The engines are failing," he reported grimly. "We pushed them too hard." Zera's hands flew across the control panel, her movements now far more confident than before. "We need to reroute power from non-essential systems," she said. "Life support, artificial gravity, anything we can spare. They worked together, their actions becoming more synchronized with each passing moment. Brian found himself anticipating Zera's needs, passing her tools or adjusting controls before she even asked. It was as if their earlier connection had opened a channel between them, allowing them to work as one. A final sputtering explosion from the engines coincided with the welcome sight of the Krelthak's warship veering off, too damaged by the asteroid field to continue its pursuit. Their relief was short-lived, however, as the full extent of their situation became clear. "We're drifting," Brian announced, his voice grim. "Life support is failing. We have maybe an hour of oxygen left." Zera's glow dimmed, her features set with commitment. "There might be a way," she said softly. "My empathic abilities, they allow me to enter a deep meditative state. It drastically reduces my need for oxygen." Brian raised an eyebrow. "That's great for you, but what about me?" "I can guide you through it," Zera explained, "but it requires physical contact to establish a mental link." Brian hesitated, the implications of such an intimate connection giving him pause. But as the oxygen levels continued to drop, he realized they had no other choice. "All right," he agreed, turning to face Zera fully. "What do we do?" Zera reached out, placing her hands on either side of Brian's face. Her touch was cool, her skin unexpectedly smooth. "Close your eyes," she instructed. "Focus on my voice. Let everything else fade away." As Brian followed her guidance, he felt a strange sensation wash over him. Images flashed through his mind, memories that weren't his own. He saw Zera as a child, shunned by her peers. He felt her loneliness, her desperate desire for acceptance. In turn, he sensed Zera experiencing his own memories, his sense of duty to Earth, the weight of his responsibilities as a diplomat, and, to his surprise, his growing attraction to her. The intimate sharing of consciousness created a bond between them that went beyond mere physical attraction. Brian felt as if he truly understood Zera for the first time, seeing past her alien appearance to the person within. Their meditation was abruptly interrupted as the shuttle lurched violently. Brian's eyes snapped open, his hands immediately going to the controls. "We're caught in a gravitational field," he reported, his voice tight with tension. "Some kind of uncharted planetoid." Zera leaned forward, her eyes scanning the view screen. "I can sense it," she said, her voice filled with wonder. "The planet. It's alive, Brian. I can feel safe places to land." With minimal power remaining, Brian had no choice but to attempt a landing on the alien world. He guided the shuttle through the atmosphere, following Zera's intuition to avoid the most dangerous terrain. As the ground rushed up to meet them, Brian made a split-second decision. He unstrapped himself from his seat and threw his body over Zera's, using himself as a shield. The impact was brutal. Metal screamed as the shuttle skidded across the alien landscape. Brian felt pain explode across his back as debris rained down around them. Then with a final, bone-jarring crash, everything went still. Silence fell, broken only by the hiss of escaping gases and the crackle of electrical fires. Brian groaned, pushing himself up to look at Zera. She was alive, her eyes wide with shock and concern. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice hoarse. Zera nodded, then winced. "I think so. You're hurt?" Brian became aware of a sharp pain in his side, but pushed it aside. "We need to get out of here," he said, forcing himself to focus on their immediate survival. Together, they pried open the damaged hatch and stumbled out onto the alien world. The air was thin but breathable, the landscape a bizarre mix of crystalline formations and swirling mists. In the distance, strange, undulating shapes moved through the fog. As the adrenaline of their escape began to fade, the full weight of their situation settled upon them. They were stranded on an unknown planet, their shuttle a wreck, with limited supplies and no way to call for help. The fate of Earth hung in the balance, dependent on the unlikely partnership between a human diplomat and a Lurian outcast. Brian turned to Zera, seeing the same mix of fear and dedication in her eyes that he felt in his heart. Whatever challenges this alien world held, they would face them together, whatever lay ahead. As the alien sun crept over the horizon, casting an otherworldly glow across the desolate landscape, Brian stirred from his unconscious state. His head throbbed, and every muscle in his body screamed in protest as he pushed himself up from the ground. The acrid smell of smoke and melted metal filled his nostrils, reminding him of their harrowing crash landing. His eyes immediately sought out Zera, finding her lying motionless beside him, half buried in the wreckage. Her usually vibrant skin had lost its luster, now marred with cuts and bruises. Brian's heart raced as he carefully extracted her from the debris, checking for signs of life. "Zera," he whispered, relief washing over him as he felt her shallow breathing. "Hold on. I've got you." Ignoring the sharp pain in his side, Brian gently lifted Zera into his arms and carried her to a nearby clearing. He laid her down on a patch of soft, moss-like vegetation, then turned his attention to the shuttle's remains. Rummaging through the wreckage, he managed to locate the emergency medical kit. As he tended to Zera's wounds, Brian marveled at the resilience of Lurian physiology. Despite the severity of the crash, her injuries seemed less extensive than he'd feared. He carefully cleaned and dressed her cuts, noting how her iridescent skin seemed to absorb the antiseptic with surprising efficiency. With Zera stable, Brian took stock of their surroundings. The planetoid surface was a stark contrast of jagged rock formations and lush alien plant life. Bioluminescent flora dotted the landscape, their ethereal glow providing just enough light to navigate the unfamiliar terrain. In the distance, barely visible through the swirling mist, Brian spotted what appeared to be the remnants of an ancient structure. Returning to the crash site, Brian scavenged for anything useful. The long-range communication system was beyond repair, crushing their hopes for an easy rescue. However, he managed to salvage a portable scanner, which immediately began picking up faint energy readings from the direction of the mysterious ruins. A soft groan from the clearing caught Brian's attention. He rushed back to find Zera stirring, her eyes fluttering open. "Brian," she murmured, her voice weak but filled with relief. He knelt beside her, supporting her as she tried to sit up. "Easy," he said, his hand lingering on her shoulder. "We made it, but the landing was rough." Zera's empathic abilities flared to life, and she gasped as she sensed the flood of emotions from Brian. Concern, perseverance, and an undercurrent of something deeper. Their shared meditation during the crash had forged a connection between them that seemed to intensify with physical proximity. "The shuttle?" Zera asked, already suspecting the answer from Brian's emotional state. Brian shook his head. "Not salvageable, but I found something interesting." He showed her the scanner, explaining the energy readings from the ruins. Zera closed her eyes, concentrating. "I can sense something, faint traces of thought patterns coming from that direction. It's unlike anything I've encountered before." They took stock of their meager supplies, a week's worth of emergency rations, basic medical equipment, and the few pieces of functional technology Brian had managed to save from the shuttle. The gravity of their situation settled over them like a heavy blanket. "We need to investigate those ruins," Brian said, his voice firm. "It's our best chance for survival, and maybe finding a way to warn Earth about the Krell-Thax." Zera nodded, her commitment matching his own. "Agreed. We should move quickly, before our supplies run out." As they gathered what they could carry, Brian fashioned makeshift weapons from the shuttle's debris. A sharp piece of metal as a knife, a length of piping as a staff. Years of military training before his diplomatic career had prepared him for survival situations, but nothing could have fully readied him for the alien world they now faced. Their journey across the planetoid surface was a gauntlet of unforeseen dangers. Carnivorous plants with lightning-fast tendrils lurked in innocent-looking meadows, forcing Brian and Zera to remain constantly vigilant. Brian's reflexes, honed by years of training, allowed him to fend off the attacks with his improvised weapons. Zera's empathic abilities proved invaluable. Her heightened senses allowed her to detect threats before they materialized, guiding them safely through fields of toxic spores and past the lairs of unseen predators. As they navigated the treacherous landscape, Brian found himself increasingly relying on Zera's intuition, their teamwork becoming seamless and instinctive. During moments of respite, they shared stories of their respective worlds. Brian spoke of Earth's diverse cultures and sprawling cities, while Zera described the crystalline spires of Lurian architecture and the intricate social structures of her people. Despite their vastly different backgrounds, they discovered surprising commonalities in their values and hopes for the future. As they hiked across a particularly barren stretch of terrain, the weather took a sudden, violent turn. Winds howled around them, carrying stinging particles that felt like shards of glass against their skin. Brian spotted a dark opening in a nearby cliff face and grabbed Zera's hand, pulling her toward the shelter. They stumbled into a vast cavern system, grateful for the reprieve from the harsh elements outside. As their eyes adjusted to the dim light, Brian and Zera gasped in unison. The cave walls were covered in intricate paintings, depicting an ancient alien race locked in a devastating conflict with another species. "Brian," Zera whispered, her voice tinged with awe and unease. "These images, they bear an unsettling resemblance to the current situation between Earth and the Krelthax." Brian nodded, his mind racing with the implications. Could there be a connection? Some sort of cyclical conflict playing out across millennia? As they delved deeper into the caverns, discussing theories about the lost civilization and its possible ties to their current predicament, neither noticed the faint whirring sound growing steadily louder. It wasn't until a metallic glint caught Brian's eye that he realized they had triggered some kind of ancient security system. A swarm of insect-like drones, each no larger than Brian's palm, burst from hidden recesses in the cave walls. Their mechanical buzzing filled the air as they converged on the intruders. "Run!" Brian shouted, grabbing Zera's arm and sprinting deeper into the cavern complex. They raced through winding tunnels, the drones in hot pursuit. Brian swung his makeshift staff, knocking several of the mechanical insects out of the air. But for each one he disabled, two more seemed to take its place. In the chaos of their flight, Brian and Zera became separated. A cluster of drones forced Brian to dive into a side passage, while Zera continued straight ahead. By the time he regained his footing, Zera was nowhere in sight. "Zera!" Brian called out, his voice echoing through the twisting corridors. He strained his ears, hoping to hear her response, but all he could make out was the ever-present buzzing of the approaching drones. Heart-pounding, Brian pressed himself against the cold stone wall, clutching his weapon. The mechanical whirring grew louder, closing in from multiple directions. In the oppressive darkness of the alien caverns, with Zera lost and danger approaching from all sides, Brian realized their quest for survival had only just begun. His heart raced as he heard the mechanical buzzing growing louder, echoing off the cavern walls. The drones were closing in, their relentless pursuit leaving him with precious few options. Brian's military training kicked in, his mind racing to formulate a plan. His eyes darted around the dimly lit corridor, searching for any advantage. Suddenly, he noticed a faint glow emanating from patches of bioluminescent fungi clinging to the cave walls. The ethereal light provided just enough illumination for him to spot a narrow crevice a few meters ahead. Without hesitation, Brian sprinted towards the opening. The buzzing intensified, and he could feel the air displacement from the drone's rapidly spinning rotors. With a desperate lunge, he threw himself into the crevice, his body scraping against the rough stone as he squeezed through. The drones slammed into the rock face, their metallic bodies crumpling upon impact. Brian allowed himself a moment of relief before pushing onward, his breath coming in ragged gasps as he navigated the tight passage. After what felt like an eternity, the crevice widened, and Brian stumbled into a vast underground chamber. His eyes widened in awe as he took in the sight before him. The cavernous space was filled with rows of alien technology, their sleek designs a stark contrast to the rough stone walls. Before Brian could fully process his surroundings, he heard a familiar voice call out his name. "Brian!" Zera emerged from a hidden passage on the opposite side of the chamber, her face a mixture of relief and concern. They rushed towards each other, meeting in the center of the room. Brian's hands found Zera's shoulders, his eyes searching her for any signs of injury. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice thick with emotion. Zera nodded, her empathic abilities allowing her to sense the depth of Brian's concern. "I'm fine. I used my abilities to sense the drone's movements and avoid them. I found a hidden passage that led me here." Their reunion was cut short as they became aware of their surroundings once more. The chamber hummed with latent energy, the air charged with the potential of the ancient technology surrounding them. Brian's attention was drawn to a massive control panel dominating one wall of the chamber. Its surface was covered in intricate symbols, some of which he recognized from the cave paintings they had encountered earlier. "Zera, look at this," he said, gesturing towards the panel. As they approached, Zera's empathic abilities suddenly intensified. She gasped, her hand flying to her temple. "I can sense echoes, emotional imprints left behind by the beings who created this place." Brian watched in fascination as Zera's eyes darted across the control panel, her fingers hovering just above its surface. "What do you feel?" he asked softly. "Purpose," Zera whispered. "Purpose and fear. Whatever this technology was designed for, it was of great importance to its creators." Working together, Brian and Zera began to decipher the alien interface. Brian's analytical mind combined with Zera's empathic insights, allowing them to make sense of the complex system. With a series of careful inputs, they activated the control panel. The chamber came alive with light as a holographic display flickered into existence above the control panel. Brian and Zera stepped back, their eyes wide as they took in the three-dimensional map of the galaxy now floating before them. "It's a monitoring station," Brian breathed, his mind racing with the implications. "Look, there are the Krelthak's fleet positions." Zera pointed to another cluster of icons. "And there's Earth's remaining forces." As they studied the map, Brian noticed a series of coordinates highlighted by a pulsing light. "Zera, what do you make of these?" Zera closed her eyes, concentrating on the residual emotions tied to the highlighted locations. "They're outposts, I think. Hidden bases of some kind. The creators of this place left them behind, filled with hope and power." Brian's pulse quickened. "Advanced technology? Weapons?" He met Zera's gaze, both of them realizing the potential importance of their discovery. "This could be what we need to defend Earth against the Krelthaks." Their excitement was cut short by a sudden tremor that shook the chamber. Dust and small debris rained down from the ceiling as the ground beneath their feet vibrated ominously. "The planetoid's core," Zera said, her voice tight with alarm. "Activating this system must have destabilized it somehow." Brian quickly pulled out the shuttle's salvage scanner, connecting it to the alien system. "We need to download as much data as we can before this place comes down around us." As Brian worked feverishly to transfer the information, Zera's attention was drawn to a small device attached to the side of the control panel. Her empathic senses told her it was important, though she couldn't explain why. Without hesitation, she detached it and slipped it into her pocket. The tremors intensified, and large cracks began to appear in the chamber walls. "We need to move now!" Brian shouted, disconnecting the scanner. They raced back towards the cavern entrance, their path now illuminated by emergency lighting that had activated throughout the complex. Dodging falling debris and leaping over widening fissures, Brian and Zera navigated the crumbling tunnels with a desperate urgency. As they emerged from the cave system, they were met with a scene of apocalyptic destruction. The planetoid's surface was fracturing before their eyes, rivers of lava bursting forth from newly formed chasms. The air grew thick with ash and noxious gases, making each breath a struggle. Brian's heart sank as he realized their crashed shuttle was now completely inaccessible, cut off by a sea of molten rock. They were stranded on a dying world with no means of escape. In a moment of desperate inspiration, Brian turned to Zera. "The data we stole, maybe we can use it to boost our emergency beacon signal." Zera nodded, her eyes lighting up with understanding. "And I can use my empathic abilities to enhance the range. Together, we might be able to create a distress call strong enough to reach beyond the system." As the world literally crumbled around them, Brian and Zera worked in a perfect synchronization. Brian used the stolen data to modify their beacon, while Zera focused her empathic energy into the device. The result was a unique subspace distress call that carried traces of both human and Lurian energy signatures. With their makeshift beacon activated, they had no choice but to seek higher ground. Brian took Zera's hand, and together they began to climb a nearby rocky outcropping. The ascent was treacherous, with rivers of lava flowing ever closer, and the terrain itself becoming increasingly unstable. Finally reaching the summit, Brian and Zera found themselves surrounded by a panorama of destruction. The planetoid was tearing itself apart, and there was nowhere left to run. They turned to each other, the gravity of their situation reflected in their eyes. In that moment, all the barriers between them crumbled. Brian pulled Zera close. Their bodies pressed together as they shared a passionate embrace. The physical and empathic connection between them intensified, a beacon of warmth and comfort in the face of their impending doom. Their intimate moment was interrupted by a sudden change in the turbulent atmosphere above them. A sleek, unfamiliar ship appeared, descending through the clouds of ash and debris. Brian and Zera watched in disbelief as the vessel approached their position, its design unlike anything they had ever seen. A beam of energy enveloped them, and Brian felt the strange sensation of his body dematerializing. In the next instant, he and Zera found themselves standing in the pristine interior of the alien ship. Before them stood a tall, elegant figure with iridescent skin and large almond-shaped eyes. "I am Captain Lorana of the Zekathari," she said, her voice melodious and otherworldly. "We detected your unique distress call and chose to investigate, breaking our long-standing policy of non-interference." As Brian opened his mouth to respond, the ship lurched violently. Through a nearby view screen, they watched in horror as the planetoid finally succumbed to its internal pressures, exploding in a spectacular display of fire and rock. Captain Lorana's fingers danced across a control panel. "The shockwave has damaged our propulsion systems," she announced, her calm demeanor belying the seriousness of the situation. "We lack the power to return to known space. We must make an emergency landing on a nearby uncharted world." Brian and Zera exchanged glances, their hands finding each other once more. They had escaped one deadly situation only to find themselves heading into another unknown. As the damaged Zekathari ship descended towards a mysterious planet shrouded in swirling clouds, Brian felt the weight of the stolen alien device in his pocket and thought of the vital data they had downloaded. Their mission to save Earth had taken yet another unexpected turn, and as the ship entered the planet's atmosphere, Brian and Zera braced themselves for whatever challenges this new world might hold. Hold. As the ship pierced through the planet's atmosphere, the hull groaned under the strain, and alarms blared throughout the vessel. Brian tightened his grip on Zera's hand, his knuckles tightening with tension. Captain Lorana's fingers danced across the control panel, her movements precise despite the violent shaking of the ship. "Brace for impact," Lorana called out, her melodious voice tinged with urgency. The ship plummeted through a thick canopy of alien vegetation, branches and leaves scraping against the hull with a deafening screech. Brian pulled Zera close, shielding her with his body as they were thrown against the bulkhead. With a thunderous crash, the ship slammed into the ground, skidding across the jungle floor. The hull breached and sparks flew from ruptured conduits. As the vessel ground to a halt, Brian's military instincts kicked in. "We need to evacuate now," he shouted, helping Zera to her feet. Captain Lorana nodded, grabbing a nearby emergency pack. "This way." The trio scrambled through the ship's corridors, dodging falling debris and bursts of electrical discharge. They emerged into the alien jungle moments before the ship erupted in a massive explosion, the heat searing their backs as they dove for cover. As the dust settled, Brian, Zera, and Captain Lorana surveyed their surroundings. The jungle pulsed with an otherworldly energy, bioluminescent plants casting an eerie glow in the dim light, filtering through the dense canopy. "Is everyone all right?" Brian asked, his eyes scanning for injuries. Zera nodded, brushing dirt from her clothes. "I'm unharmed, Captain." "I am functional," Lorana responded, her iridescent skin shimmering as she stood. "But we have lost most of our supplies and equipment in the crash." Brian's hand instinctively went to his pocket, relief washing over him as he felt the outline of the alien device they had taken from the monitoring station. "At least we still have this," he said, pulling out the small object. Zera's eyes widened. "And the data you downloaded, it's still in the scanner, right?" Brian nodded, retrieving the scanner from his pack. "It's here, but without a ship, I'm not sure how much good it will do us." Captain Lorana approached, her elegant features set in willpower. "Perhaps not all is lost. My tricorder is detecting a faint energy signature several kilometers from our position. It could indicate a settlement or technological installation. Hope flickered in Brian's chest. Then that's our best bet for getting off this planet and warning Earth about the Krelthax. As they gathered what little they could salvage from the wreckage, Brian took stock of their situation. They were stranded on an unknown world, with limited supplies and no immediate means of escape. But they had each other, and the vital information that could turn the tide in the war against the Krelthax. We should move quickly, Zera suggested, her empathic abilities sensing the underlying tension. I can feel presences in the jungle. We're not alone here. Brian nodded, taking point as they set off in the direction indicated by Lorana's tricorder. The jungle seemed to react to their presence, luminescent vines twisting and curling as they passed. More than once, Brian had to use his combat knife to hack through vegetation that suddenly constricted to block their path. As they trudged through the alien terrain, Zera's empathic senses proved invaluable. She would often pause, her eyes closed in concentration, before guiding the group to change course. "There's a predator nearby," she would whisper, or, "This way feels safer." Captain Lorana observed their interactions with keen interest, occasionally making notes on her tricorder. "The synergy between your species is fascinating," she commented during a brief rest. "I've never encountered such an efficient interspecies dynamic." Brian and Zera exchanged a glance, a silent understanding passing between them. Their connection had grown stronger since their escape from the doomed planetoid, and now it felt almost tangible. As they pressed on, the jungle began to thin, giving way to the crumbling remains of what appeared to be an ancient civilization. Stone structures overgrown with alien flora loomed before them. "These ruins," Zera breathed, her hand trailing along a weathered pillar. "They're similar to the structures we saw on the planetoid." Brian nodded, his eyes scanning the area for potential threats. "Let's hope they hold some answers, or better yet, a way off this planet." They cautiously entered what appeared to be a central chamber, its high ceiling lost in shadow. As they moved deeper into the structure, Brian's foot caught on a hidden mechanism. A low rumble filled the air, and the floor began to shift. "Look out!" Brian shouted, pulling Zera and Lorana back as a section of the floor slid away, revealing a hidden chamber below. The group peered into the newly exposed room, their eyes widening at the sight of advanced technology that seemed wildly out of place among the ancient ruins. Captain Lorana gasped, her usual composure slipping. "Impossible. Some of these devices, they're prototypes of Zikthari technology." As they carefully entered the chamber, Brian's elbow brushed against a console. A holographic projection flickered to life, filling the room with ghostly figures. The beings spoke in an unfamiliar language, their expressions grave. "Can anyone understand them?" Brian asked, frustration evident in his voice. Zera closed her eyes, reaching out with her empathic abilities. "I can feel their emotions, fear, desperation, and a grim drive. They're discussing some kind of threat." As the hologram played on, Captain Lorana's expression grew increasingly troubled. "I can decipher parts of their language. They speak of a parasitic species that consumes entire civilizations, a cyclical threat that returns every few millennia." Brian's blood ran cold as the implication sank in. The Krelthax, they're not just invaders, they're part of an ancient cycle of destruction. Before they could process this revelation, the chamber began to shake violently. Dust and debris rained down from the ceiling as the ancient structure groaned around them. "The hologram must have triggered some kind of defense system," Lorana shouted over the cacophony. "We need to leave, now." They scrambled back to the surface, narrowly avoiding being crushed as the hidden chamber collapsed behind them. As they emerged from the ruins, a bone-chilling roar echoed through the jungle. Brian's hand went to his weapon, his eyes scanning the tree line. "What was that?" Zera's face paled. "Something big, and it's coming this way." The foliage parted, revealing a massive, six-legged creature with mottled skin that seemed to shift and change color to match its surroundings. Its jaws dripped with viscous saliva as it fixed its multiple eyes on the group. "Run!" Brian yelled, pushing Zera and Lorana ahead of him as the predator lunged. They tore through the jungle, the beast crashing through the undergrowth behind them. In the chaos of the pursuit, Brian lost sight of Captain Lorana. He grabbed Zera's hand, pulling her along as they sprinted through the alien forest. The chase led them to the edge of a cliff, the ground dropping away into a misty abyss. Brian and Zera skidded to a halt, turning to face the approaching predator. With nowhere left to run, Brian's hand closed around the alien device in his pocket. Without fully understanding its function, he activated it, pointing it at the advancing creature. A high-frequency pulse erupted from the device, causing the predator to rear back, its movements becoming erratic. Seizing the opportunity, Brian and Zera slipped past the disoriented beast, plunging back into the relative safety of the dense jungle. As night fell, they found shelter in a small cave, their breaths coming in ragged gas. The adrenaline of their narrow escape began to fade, replaced by the stark reality of their situation. "We lost Captain Lorana," Zera said, her voice barely above a whisper. Brian nodded grimly, his hand finding hers in the darkness. "We'll find her, but for now we need to rest and regroup." As they huddled together in the confined space, the intensity of their shared experiences washed over them. The fear, the excitement, the constant dance with death. It all culminated in a moment of raw emotion. Their lips met in a passionate kiss, months of unspoken tension finally finding release. Zera's empathic abilities heightened the experience, creating a feedback loop of sensation and emotion that threatened to overwhelm them both. In the aftermath of their intimate encounter, as they lay entwined, the alien device suddenly activated. A holographic star map filled the small cave, pinpointing locations across the galaxy. Brian sat up, his eyes wide. "These must be other outposts, places where we might find the technology to stop the Krellthax." Zera nodded, her expression a mix of hope and concern. "We have the key to saving the galaxy, but first we need to find Captain Lorana and get off this planet." As dawn broke, they emerged from the cave, their relationship fundamentally altered. The jungle stretched out before them, teeming with unknown dangers and possibilities. In the distance, artificial structures rose above the canopy, hinting at a native civilization that could be their salvation or their doom. Brian squeezed Zera's hand, noticing for the first time subtle changes in her physiology. Her skin had taken on a slight iridescence, reminiscent of Captain Lorana's. "Zera," he said cautiously, "are you feeling all right?" She looked at her arms, her eyes widening in surprise. I'm not sure. Something's happening to me, Brian. I can feel it." As they stood on the precipice of a new challenge, the weight of their mission pressed down upon them. The fate of Earth, of countless civilizations, rested in their hands. And now the mystery of Zera's transformation added another layer of urgency to their quest. With a shared look of dedication, they set off towards the distant structures, the alien device clutched tightly in Brian's hand. A beacon of hope in a galaxy on the brink of annihilation. Brian and Zera set out toward the distant structures, their footsteps careful and measured as they navigated the alien terrain. The jungle gradually thinned, giving way to rolling hills dotted with vibrant, unfamiliar flora. As they crested a ridge, the full scope of the settlement came into view. Nestled in a valley, a collection of organic-looking buildings pulsed with soft, bioluminescent light. The structures seemed to grow from the earth itself, their surfaces covered in intricate, swirling patterns that shifted and changed like living things. "It's beautiful," Zera breathed, her newly iridescent skin shimmering in response to the settlement's glow. Brian nodded, his eyes scanning for any signs of danger. "Let's approach slowly. We don't know how they'll react to us." As they drew closer, movement caught their attention. Figures emerged from the buildings, their forms sleek and graceful. The inhabitants' skin glowed with an inner light, pulsing in patterns that seemed to communicate emotions and intentions. Suddenly, a group of the aliens noticed Brian and Zera. Their luminescence flared brightly, patterns racing across their skin in what appeared to be alarm. Several of them brandished objects that looked unsettlingly like weapons. Brian raised his hands slowly, palms out. "Easy," he murmured to Zera. "Let's show them we're not a threat." Zera closed her eyes, reaching out with her empathic abilities. They're scared, Brian, but also curious. Taking a deep breath, Brian took a step forward. He pointed to himself, then to Zera, and made a sweeping gesture to indicate the settlement. Slowly, he mimed drinking and eating, then sleeping. The aliens conferred among themselves, their skin pulsing in rapid, complex patterns. After a tense moment, one of them stepped forward. It mimicked Brian's gestures, then pointed towards the settlement. "I think that's an invitation," Brian said, relief evident in his voice. As they entered the settlement, escorted by the curious aliens, Zera's empathic senses were overwhelmed by the myriad emotions swirling around them. Curiosity, apprehension, and excitement mingled in a dizzying array. One of the aliens, taller than the rest and with more intricate patterns flowing across its skin, approached them. It placed a hand on its chest and made a sound that was part whistle, part chime. "Lumina," Zera said suddenly, the word appearing in her mind. I think that's what they call themselves." Brian looked at her in surprise. "Your abilities are getting stronger." The lead Lumina gestured for them to follow, leading them to a central structure that pulsed with a soft, blue light. Inside, they found themselves in a circular room filled with what appeared to be advanced biotech consoles. Using a combination of gestures, simple drawings, and Zera's growing empathic understanding, Brian managed to convey their situation, their crash, their mission, and their need for help. The Lumina listened intently, their skin patterns shifting in complex ways as they absorbed the information. Finally, the lead Lumina stepped forward and placed a hand on a nearby console. A holographic display sprang to life, showing the planet and its surrounding space. Through a series of images and empathic impressions, the Lumina conveyed their own history. They were descendants of an ancient, spacefaring civilization, the same one that had built the ruins Brian and Zera had encountered earlier. While most of their ancestors had left to colonize the stars eons ago, this group had chosen to remain, maintaining their connection to their homeworld. As days passed and Brian and Zera integrated into the Lumina community, Zera's transformation became more pronounced. Her skin developed a subtle luminescence, pulsing faintly with her emotions. Her empathic abilities grew stronger, allowing her to communicate more effectively with the Lumina. Brian watched these changes with a mix of fascination and concern. One evening, as they sat together on a balcony overlooking the settlement, he gently took her hand. "Zera, how are you feeling about all this?" he asked, his voice soft. She smiled, her skin pulsing with a warm glow. "It's overwhelming, Brian, but also exciting. I feel more connected to everything around me. It's like I can sense the very essence of this world." Before Brian could respond, a commotion from the center of the settlement caught their attention. A group of Lumina were clustered around a newly arrived search party. At the center of the group, supported by two Lumina, was a familiar figure. "Captain Lirana!" Brian exclaimed, rushing toward the group with Zera close behind. The Zikathari captain looked battered and exhausted, but her eyes lit up at the sight of her companions. "Brian, Zera, thank the stars you're alive." As they helped Lirana to a healing chamber, she filled them in on her ordeal. She had sought refuge in a series of caverns after being separated during the Predator attack. Her tricorder, though damaged, had picked up a faint subspace transmission before failing completely. "A Krelthax scout ship," Lirana said, her voice grim. "They're on their way here. We don't have much time." The news sent a ripple of alarm through the Lumina, their skin flashing with patterns of fear and persistence. The lead Lumina stepped forward, its luminescence pulsing with perseverance. Through Zera's enhanced empathic abilities, they understood the Lumina's proposal. Beneath the settlement lay a vast complex of ancient technology, including a planetary defense system designed to combat the very threat they now faced. Brian's strategic mind immediately began formulating a plan. "We need to get that defense system online before the Krelthax arrive. Lirana, can you work with the Lumina to interface our technology with theirs?" The Zikathari captain nodded. "With their biotech knowledge and my scientific expertise, it should be possible." Zera stepped forward, her skin glowing with dedication. "I can help too. My new abilities, I think I can interface directly with the ancient systems." As they descended into the underground complex, Brian couldn't help but marvel at the scale of the technology surrounding them. Massive energy conduits pulsed with power, while holographic displays flickered to life, showing the planet's defensive grid. The next few days were a blur of activity. Brian coordinated the Lumina's efforts, his military training proving invaluable in organizing their defenses. Lorana worked tirelessly with the Lumina scientists, merging their knowledge to bring the ancient systems online. And Zera, her new abilities growing stronger by the hour, became the vital link between the alien tech and their efforts. As they worked, Brian and Zera found moments to connect, their bond deepening in the face of the challenges before them. The stress of their situation and the ongoing changes in Zera's body only served to bring them closer together. On the fifth day, as they were running final checks on the defense grid, an alarm blared through the complex. Brian rushed to the main control room, his heart pounding. On the central holographic display, a single point of light appeared in high orbit around the planet. The Krelthak scout ship had arrived. Brian's hand found Zera's, their fingers intertwining as they stared at the display. Around them, the Lumina's skin pulsed with a mixture of fear and persistence. Captain Lorana stood at a nearby console, her fingers flying over the controls as she prepared the defense systems. "This is it," Brian said, his voice steady despite the tension coiling in his gut. "Everything we've been through, everything we fought for, it all comes down to this moment." Zera squeezed his hand, her skin glowing with a fierce intensity. "Whatever happens, we face it together." As the Krelthak ship began its descent towards the planet, the ancient technology hummed to life around them, ready to face the very threat it was designed to combat millennia ago. The fate of not just their small group, but potentially the entire galaxy, hung in the balance as they prepared to make their stand. Stand as the ancient technology hummed to life around them. The dormant planetary defense system awakened with a low resonant pulse that vibrated through the underground complex. Massive energy cannons rose from hidden silos, their barrels aimed skyward. On the central holographic display, the Krelthak scout ship's trajectory shifted erratically as it detected the sudden surge of energy from the surface. Brian's military instincts kicked in, and he began coordinating with the Lumina, his voice steady and authoritative. "Target the ship's propulsion systems," he instructed, pointing to a schematic that appeared on a nearby screen. "If we can immobilize it, we might be able to force them to retreat." Zera, her skin now glowing with an intense otherworldly light, stepped forward and placed her hands on the main control console. Her eyes closed in concentration as she interfaced directly with the ancient technology. The targeting systems responded to her thoughts with unprecedented accuracy, adjusting faster than any manual input could achieve. "Ready," she said, her voice carrying an ethereal echo. "Fire," Brian commanded. The energy cannons discharged in perfect synchronization, sending brilliant beams of light streaking through the atmosphere. The Krelthak ship, displaying remarkable agility, narrowly avoided the initial volley. The near miss, however, forced the alien vessel to abandon its original attack vector. Captain Lorana, her fingers flying over a bioorganic interface, called out, "They're changing tactics. Brace for counterattack." No sooner had the words left her mouth than the Krelthaks unleashed a barrage of plasma torpedoes. The projectiles streaked towards the planet's surface, their cyan trails cutting through the sky. "Shields!" Brian shouted, his heart pounding. Lorana nodded, her expression grim as she activated a long-dormant planetary shield. The defensive barrier flickered to life, just as the plasma torpedoes made impact. The shield absorbed most of the blast, but the strain on the ancient systems sent power fluctuations rippling across the defense grid. Alarms blared throughout the complex as consoles flickered and dimmed. The Lumina's skin patterns pulsed with alarm and confusion. "We're losing power to the eastern quadrant," one of the Lumina technicians reported, its luminescence flashing urgently. Before Brian could respond, a new alert sounded. The holographic display shifted to show multiple drop pods launching from the Krelthak ship. "They're deploying ground forces," Brian said, his mind racing to formulate a defense strategy. "Zera, can you get our systems back online?" Zera nodded, her body now pulsing with an intense glow. She placed both hands on the central console, closing her eyes in deep concentration. To Brian's amazement, the damaged components of the defense grid began to repair themselves at a molecular level. Zera's newly enhanced abilities were pushing the ancient technology beyond its original capabilities. "I've got it," she said, her voice strained, "but I don't know how long I can maintain this level of control." Brian squeezed her shoulder reassuringly before turning to address the Lumina. "We need to organize a ground defense. They'll be targeting the settlement." The lead Lumina stepped forward, its skin patterns shifting to convey willpower. Through Zera's empathic translation, it communicated their readiness to defend their home. Brian quickly outlined a series of guerrilla tactics, capitalizing on the Lumina's knowledge of the terrain and their natural bioluminescent abilities. As they mobilized, the first tremors of impact shook the complex. The Krelthax shock troops had landed. Captain Lorana's voice cut through the tension. "Brian, Zera, you need to see this." They rushed to her console, where a detailed analysis of the Krelthax ship's energy signature was displayed. "It matches the parasitic species from the ancient hologram," Lorana explained, her expression grim. "Our suspicions were correct. The Krelthax aren't just conquerors, they're a galactic infection." The revelation sent a chill through the room, but there was no time to dwell on its implications. The sound of energy weapons discharging echoed from above, signaling the beginning of the ground assault. Brian grabbed a Lumina-crafted energy rifle, its organic curves fitting comfortably in his hands. "Zera, can you handle the defense grid?" She nodded, her entire body now suffused with a soft pulsing light. "Go. I'll cover you from here." With a final look at Zera, Brian led a group of Lumina warriors to the surface. They emerged into chaos. The beautiful bioorganic structures of the settlement were marred by scorch marks and debris. Krelthax shock troops, towering figures in sleek dark armor, advanced through the streets with mechanical precision. Brian's voice rang out, directing the Lumina defenders. They used the unique architecture of their settlement to their advantage, appearing and disappearing in flashes of bioluminescence that disoriented the Krelthax soldiers. Brian himself engaged in close combat with one of the alien warriors, his human adaptability and combat experience allowing him to hold his own against the physically superior opponent. In a desperate move, Brian managed to dislodge the Krelthax soldier's helmet. The face beneath was a nightmarish fusion of organic and mechanical components, confirming the parasitic nature of their enemy. Using the momentary distraction, Brian incapacitated the soldier with a well-placed shot from his energy rifle. As the battle raged on the surface, Zera pushed her abilities to their absolute limit. Her consciousness seemed to expand, becoming one with the planet's defense systems. With a surge of power that made the very ground tremble, she redirected the entire defensive grid into a single, concentrated beam. The energy blast lanced through the atmosphere, striking the Krelthax ship with devastating accuracy. The vessel's shields failed under the onslaught, and secondary explosions blossomed across its hull. Trailing debris and plasma, the Krelthax scout ship retreated from orbit, disappearing into the depths of space. A ragged cheer went up from the Lumina as the remaining Krelthax ground forces, cut off from their command ship, fell into disarray. Brian and the defenders pressed their advantage, quickly overwhelming the isolated pockets of resistance. As the last echoes of battle faded, Brian rushed back to the underground complex. He found Zera slumped over the control console, her glow dimmed but steady. He gently helped her to her feet, supporting her weight as she regained her strength. "We did it," she whispered, a tired smile on her face. "You did it," Brian corrected, his voice filled with awe and admiration. Captain Lorana approached, her expression a mix of relief and concern. "We've won the day, but this is just getting started. The Krelthax will be back, and in greater numbers." Brian nodded grimly. "Then we need to be ready. We have to find a way to contact Earth, warn them about the true nature of the Krelthax threat." As the adrenaline of battle faded, the full weight of their situation settled upon them. They had survived this encounter, but the war had only just begun. The Lumina gathered around, their skin patterns conveying a mix of gratitude and drive. Zera, her strength returning, stood up straight. "My transformation, It might be the key to fighting the Krelthax on a larger scale. We need to understand it better. Brian took her hand, feeling the subtle vibration of energy beneath her skin. Whatever it takes, we'll face it together. As night fell on the battle-scarred planet, the group gathered to plan their next move. They had three clear objectives: repair Captain Lorana's ship using salvaged Krelthax technology, explore the ancient ruins for additional weapons or information, and study Zera's ongoing transformation. Later, as the others rested and tended to the wounded, Brian and Zera found a moment of solitude atop a Lumina watchtower. They stood close, their bodies illuminated by the soft glow of Zera's transformed skin and the starlight above. "What do you think happens now?" Zera asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Brian's arm tightened around her waist. "I don't know, but whatever comes next, whatever we have to face, we'll do it side by side." As they embraced, a shooting star streaked across the horizon, a silent reminder of the vast, unknown galaxy that awaited them. The battle was won, but their journey and their fight to save Earth and defeat the Krelthax was only beginning. Just beginning. The words hung in the air, heavy with the weight of their shared responsibility. As the first light of dawn crept over the horizon, Brian and Zera made their way to the makeshift laboratory, where Captain Lorana and a team of Lumina scientists awaited them. The settlement was still showing signs of the recent battle, with repair crews working tirelessly to mend the damage inflicted by the Krelthax attack. Zera's skin pulsed with a soft, ethereal glow as she entered the lab. Brian noticed the way nearby objects seemed to quiver slightly in her presence, as if responding to an unseen force. "Let's begin," Captain Lorana said, gesturing to a bioorganic examination table. As Zera lay down, the table's surface molded to her body, creating a perfect cradle. Lorana activated a series of scanning devices, their holographic displays filling the air with streams of data. "Remarkable," one of the Lumina scientists exclaimed, its skin patterns shifting rapidly in what Brian had come to recognize as excitement. "The hybridization process has accelerated exponentially overnight." Brian watched as Zera lifted her hand, her brow furrowed in concentration. A nearby data pad rose shakily into the air, suspended by an invisible force. "Telekinesis," Lorana breathed, her eyes wide. "Your abilities are expanding beyond empathy." Before they could delve further into this new development, a commotion outside drew their attention. A group of Lumina scouts had returned, their arms laden with salvaged components from the crashed Krelthax ship. Brian's military instincts kicked in. "I'll help with the integration," he said, giving Zera's hand a quick squeeze before heading out to meet the scouts. The next few hours were a blur of activity as Brian worked alongside Lumina engineers to incorporate the Krelthax technology into Captain Lorana's damaged vessel. The task proved far more challenging than anticipated. "It's like it's fighting us," Brian muttered, wiping sweat from his brow as he struggled to connect a Krelthax power coupling to the ship's systems. The alien technology seemed to resist integration, its circuitry shifting and adapting in ways that defied conventional engineering principles. Suddenly, an alarm blared throughout the settlement. Brian's heart raced as he sprinted to the control center, fearing another Krelthax attack. He found Zera already there, her hands placed on the main console, her eyes closed in concentration. "Multiple objects entering the atmosphere," she reported, her voice carrying an otherworldly echo. "But they're not Krelthax, they're escape pods." Relief washed over Brian, quickly replaced by a sense of urgency. "We need to organize rescue teams," he said, turning to the Lumina warriors who had gathered in response to the alarm. Within minutes, Brian was leading a team towards the nearest crash site. As they approached, he saw the smoking wreckage of an escape pod, its hull bearing the insignia of Earth's Defense Force. "This is Lieutenant Brian Chen," he called out, his voice carrying over the crackling of small fires. "We're here to help. Is anyone alive in there?" A groan from within the pod spurred Brian into action. He and two Lumina warriors pried open the damaged hatch, revealing a mix of human and alien survivors huddled inside. A woman in a singed Earth Defense Force uniform stumbled out, her eyes widening as she took in Brian and his alien companions. "Commander Elena Vasquez," she said, her voice hoarse. "Thank God you're here. We thought we were done for. As Brian helped the survivors out of the pod, Commander Vasquez filled him in on the dire situation. Earth's defenses are crumbling, she said, her face grim. The Krelthax, they're not just conquering, they're assimilating. We've seen them absorb captured individuals into their collective. It's a nightmare. Brian's mind raced with the implications of this news as they made their way back to the settlement. The other rescue teams were returning as well, bringing with them a diverse group of survivors from various species. As they approached the settlement's entrance, Brian noticed Zera waiting for them, her skin pulsing with an intense glow. Her eyes locked onto one of the alien survivors, a tall, slender being with iridescent skin. "Brian," Zera said, her voice tight with urgency. "That one, the Centaurian. Something's wrong." Brian followed her gaze to the alien she indicated. "What do you mean?" "I can sense it," Zera whispered. "A faint Krelthax presence. It's like he's been partially assimilated." Without missing a beat, Brian quietly alerted Captain Lorana and Commander Vasquez. They quickly devised a plan to isolate the Centaurian, who they learned was named Crix, under the guise of medical examination. As the survivors were led to the settlement's medical facilities, Brian pulled Zera aside. "Your abilities," he said, his voice low, "they're growing stronger by the hour. How are you handling it?" Zera's eyes met his, a swirl of emotions visible in their depths. "It's overwhelming," she admitted, "but also exhilarating. I feel like I'm on the verge of understanding something vast and ancient." Before Brian could respond, Captain Lorana approached them, her expression a mix of excitement and concern. "We've completed the initial analysis of Zera's transformation," she said, "and we've made a remarkable discovery." They followed Lorana to the lab, where holographic displays showed complex molecular structures interacting. "Zera's hybrid physiology," Lorana explained, "appears to be resistant to Krelthax assimilation. In fact, her cells actively repel and destroy Krelthax parasitic cells." The implications of this discovery hung in the air, a potential turning point in their fight against the galactic invaders. But as discussions about how to proceed began, Brian noticed Zera's attention shift, her gaze becoming distant. "Zera?" he asked, concerned. "What is it?" "Something's calling to me," she whispered, her skin pulsing with an intense light. "From deep within the ruins. We need to go there. Now." Without waiting for a response, Zera began moving with purpose towards the ancient underground complex. Brian and the others followed, a sense of anticipation building as they descended into the depths of the planet's history. In a chamber they had never seen before, a holographic message flickered to life, triggered by Zera's unique energy signature. The image of a being from the long-lost civilization filled the room, its voice echoing through the ages. "The key to defeating the cyclical threat lies within," the hologram intoned. "But to claim it, you must prove yourselves worthy through a series of trials." As the hologram faded, leaving them in stunned silence, Brian and Zera exchanged a look of commitment. The fate of Earth and countless other worlds now rested on their shoulders. The true test of their tenacity was about to begin. Begin. The ancient message echoed in their minds as Brian and Zera exchanged a determined look. They turned to face Captain Lorana, Commander Vasquez, and the assembled team of Lumina experts. "We need to undertake these trials," Brian said, his voice steady despite the gravity of the situation. "Whatever this weapon is, it might be our only chance against the Krelthax." Zera nodded, her skin pulsing with an otherworldly glow. "I can sense the importance of this place. We have to try." Captain Lorana stepped forward, her expression resolute. "Agreed, we'll face these challenges together." Commander Vasquez, still processing the enormity of their situation, gave a curt nod. "Let's do this." As one, the group approached the entrance to the newly revealed chamber. The ancient stones seemed to respond to their presence, glowing faintly as they drew near. With a deep breath, Brian placed his hand on the cool surface. The entrance slid open with a low rumble, revealing a dimly lit passageway beyond. They filed in, the air thick with anticipation. As the last member of their team crossed the threshold, the entrance sealed behind them with a resounding thud. The message was clear. There was no turning back. The chamber expanded before them, its true size revealed as hidden light sources activated. Brian's military instincts kicked in as he surveyed the terrain. The floor ahead was a maze of platforms suspended over what appeared to be a bottomless chasm. Mechanical whirs and clicks echoed through the vast space. "Looks like our first trial," Brian said, his eyes narrowing as he assessed the challenges ahead. "Physical obstacles. Stay alert and follow my lead." He took point, guiding the team across the treacherous terrain. Platforms shifted unexpectedly, forcing quick adjustments. Zera's enhanced senses proved invaluable, allowing her to anticipate sudden movements and warn the others. "Watch out," she called, her voice tinged with urgency. "The platform to your left is about to drop." Brian reacted instantly, pulling Commander Vasquez back just as the section of floor beneath her feet gave way. The commander's eyes widened in shock as she steadied herself. "Thanks," she breathed. "How did you know?" Zera's skin flickered with pulses of light. "I can feel the energy patterns. It's like seeing the invisible." As they progressed deeper into the chamber, the obstacles grew more complex. Swinging pendulums, spiked walls, and laser grids tested their reflexes and teamwork. Brian's military training shone through as he coordinated their movements, while Zera's growing telekinetic abilities helped them overcome seemingly impassable barriers. At one point, they faced a chasm too wide to jump. Zera closed her eyes, concentrating intensely. The air around them seemed to vibrate as she extended her hand. Slowly, a section of fallen debris rose into the air, forming a makeshift bridge. "Hurry," she gasped, the strain evident in her voice. "I don't know how long I can hold it." They rushed across, Brian supporting Zera as she stumbled from the exertion. As the last team member cleared the gap, the debris crashed back into the abyss. Captain Lorana placed a comforting hand on Zera's shoulder. "Your abilities are growing stronger by the minute. It's remarkable." Before Zera could respond, the chamber shifted around them. The physical obstacles receded, replaced by a series of complex consoles and holographic displays. Strange symbols and alien technologies filled the air. "The second trial," one of the Lumina experts observed, "a test of our minds and technological prowess." Captain Lorana stepped forward, her scientific curiosity piqued. "These systems, they're unlike anything I've ever seen, a perfect integration of multiple alien technologies." Commander Vasquez joined her, studying the displays with a tactical eye. "Some of these patterns, they remind me of Krelthak's encryption methods we encountered during the invasion." The team worked together, combining their diverse knowledge and skills to unravel the ancient puzzles. The Lumina experts provided crucial insights into their ancestors' technology, while Lorana and Vasquez applied their off-world expertise. As they completed each puzzle, new pathways opened, leading them deeper into the heart of the ancient structure. Zera's connection to the technology seemed to grow stronger with each step, her body resonating with the surrounding energy. Suddenly, the environment shifted once more. The team found themselves in what appeared to be a control room, facing a large holographic display. A simulation flickered to life, presenting a harrowing scenario. "We are faced with a choice," Brian said, his voice grave as he interpreted the alien symbols. "We can either save a small group of individuals trapped in a failing stasis pod, or preserve a data core containing information that could potentially save billions of lives." The team erupted into heated debate. Commander Vasquez argued for preserving the data, citing the greater good. Some of the Lumina experts pushed to save the individuals, emphasizing the value of all life. Captain Lorana analyzed the scenario from multiple angles, trying to find a compromise. As tensions rose, Brian turned to Zera. Her eyes were closed, her face a mask of concentration. "Zera?" he asked softly. "What do you sense?" She opened her eyes, a look of revelation on her face. "It's not just about the choice we make," she said. "It's about how we make it. Our unity in the face of an impossible decision. That's what's being tested." With this insight, the team refocused their efforts. They worked together, combining their skills and knowledge to find a solution that would satisfy both objectives. It was Brian who finally proposed the winning strategy, a daring plan that involved redistributing power from non-essential systems to both save the individuals and preserve the crucial data. As they implemented the solution, the simulation faded away, replaced by a sense of accomplishment. But their relief was short-lived. The chamber rumbled and holographic projectors sprang to life around them. Krell-Thax warriors materialized, their alien forms radiating menace. Brian's combat instincts kicked in immediately. "Defensive positions!" he shouted, falling into a fighting stance. The final trial had begun, a grueling combat simulation that would push them to their limits. As the holographic Krell-Thax advanced, Brian, Zera, and their allies prepared to face their greatest challenge yet, unaware of the even greater trials that awaited them beyond this ancient chamber. Testing chamber. The holographic Krell-Thax advanced, their alien forms distorting the air around them. Brian's muscles tensed as he prepared for the grueling combat simulation. Suddenly, the chamber shuddered violently, throwing everyone off balance. The holographic projectors flickered and died, plunging the room into darkness. What's happening?" Commander Vasquez's voice cut through the confusion. Before anyone could respond, emergency lights bathed the chamber in an eerie red glow. A deafening klaxon blared, echoing off the ancient walls. Captain Lorana's eyes widened as she checked her wrist computer. "It's not part of the simulation. We're under attack. The Krell-Thax fleet has begun orbital bombardment." As if in response to the threat, the chamber hummed to life. Streams of energy coursed through previously dormant conduits, converging at the center of the room. A shimmering dome of translucent energy expanded outward, enveloping the entire structure. "The chamber's defenses," one of the Lumina experts gasped. "They're activating." Brian's mind raced, assessing their options. His gaze fell on a crystalline device near the center of the room, pulsing with an otherworldly light. The genetic recoder. "We need to use that device," he said, his voice cutting through the chaos. "It's our best shot against the Krell-Thax." Captain Lorana nodded, already moving towards the ancient technology. "We'll need to interface our systems with the chambers. It might boost our defensive capabilities." "Agreed," Commander Vasquez said, her tactical mind already formulating a plan. "We'll need to fortify our position. The Krell-Thax won't stop at orbital bombardment." As the team sprang into action, Brian turned to Zera. Her skin pulsed with an intensity he'd never seen before, her entire body radiating a brilliant, otherworldly light. "Zera," he said, reaching for her hand, "are you okay?" She met his gaze, her eyes swirling with power and uncertainty. "I can feel it, Brian. The device. It's calling to me." Without another word, Zera approached the genetic recoder. As her hand touched its crystalline surface, a visible arc of energy connected them. Zera gasped, her body rigid as power surged through her. "Captain," Brian called out, torn between his duty and his concern for Zera. "We need to monitor her vitals." Lorana rushed over, her scientific curiosity warring with worry. "Incredible," she murmured, scanning Zera with a handheld device. "She's acting as a living conduit for the recoder's energy." The chamber shuddered again, more violently this time. The protective dome flickered ominously. "They're breaching the atmosphere," Vasquez reported, her voice tense. "Drop pods incoming. We need to prepare for ground assault." Brian tore his gaze away from Zera, forcing himself to focus on the immediate threat. "All right, let's move. We need to establish a defensive perimeter." He quickly organized the Lumina warriors and the rest of their team, positioning them at key points around the chamber. They used a combination of salvaged Krell-Thax weapons and the chamber's ancient defenses to fortify their position. The first wave of Krell-Thax warriors hit hard and fast. Energy weapons lit up the alien landscape as Brian coordinated their defense, the air filled with the acrid smell of ozone and the thunderous roar of explosions. Inside the chamber, Zera struggled against the overwhelming power coursing through her body. The genetic recoder emitted a high-pitched whine, arcs of energy crackling around it. "Her life signs are fluctuating," Lorana called out, her voice tight with concern. "We need to stabilize the energy flow, or—" Her words were cut off by a commotion near the chamber's entrance. The partially assimilated Centaurian, Crix, had broken free from his containment, his eyes a swirling mix of his natural color and Krell-Thax influence, locked onto the genetic recoder. Commander Vasquez intercepted him, engaging in a brutal hand-to-hand fight. "I've got him," she grunted, blocking a vicious strike. "Focus on the recoder." Outside, the battle intensified. A massive Krelthax siege weapon lumbered into view, its main cannon glowing with building energy. "They're targeting the protective field," Brian shouted, organizing a counterattack. "We need to take out that siege weapon." As he led a team to flank the monstrous machine, Brian felt a sudden sharp pain in his chest. Through their bond, he sensed Zera's distress. He turned back towards the chamber, just in time to see her collapse. "Zera!" he cried out, his heart pounding. He fought his way back, cutting through waves of Krelthax warriors with desperate intensity. Inside the chamber, the genetic recoder pulsed with blinding light. Energy arced from its crystalline surface, spreading outward in a rapidly expanding wave. It washed over the Krelthax forces, causing them to convulse and transform. Brian reached Zera just as the wave of energy crested. He pulled her into his arms, shielding her body with his own as a blinding flash engulfed the entire planet. For a moment, everything went silent. When Brian opened his eyes, the world had changed. The Krelthax forces had stopped their attack, their aggressive behavior replaced by confusion and disarray. "Zera," he whispered, cradling her unconscious form. "Zera, please, wake up." Captain Lorana and the Lumina experts rushed to their side, working frantically to stabilize Zera's condition. As they fought to revive her, Brian couldn't shake the feeling that something fundamental had shifted. The genetic recoder had done more than just stop the Krelthax attack. It had altered the very fabric of their reality. Outside, the transformed Krelthax began to communicate with the defenders, their hostility replaced by bewilderment. As Zera stirred in his arms, Brian realized that while they had won this battle, the true challenges were only beginning. The war against the Krelthax was a long way to go, and the implications of what they had just done were only starting to unfold. The genetic recoder's energy wave had altered more than just the Krelthax. It had fundamentally changed the course of galactic history. As the transformed Krelthax forces lowered their weapons, confusion evident in their alien features, Brian felt Zera stir in his arms. Her eyes fluttered open, revealing swirling pools of iridescent light. "Brian," she whispered, her voice tinged with uncertainty. "What happened?" Before he could respond, Captain Lorana's voice cut through the air. "Her vitals are stabilizing, but something's different." Brian looked down at Zera and gasped. Her skin had taken on a soft, ethereal glow that pulsed gently. As he watched, the color shifted from a calm blue to a warm amber. "Zera, your skin," he began, but she was already examining her hands with wide-eyed wonder. "I can feel everything," she breathed. Her gaze swept across the chamber, taking in the transformed Krelthax, the human defenders, and the Lumina. Their emotions, their thoughts, it's overwhelming. Outside, the sounds of battle had given way to an eerie quiet. Commander Vasquez approached, her expression a mix of relief and wariness. "The Krelthax have ceased all aggressive actions. They seem lost." Brian helped Zera to her feet, supporting her as she swayed slightly. "We need to establish communication with them," he said, his diplomatic instincts kicking in. "If we don't act fast, this confusion could turn to panic." As if on cue, a group of Krelthax warriors approached the chamber's entrance. Their movements were hesitant, lacking the predatory grace they had exhibited mere minutes ago. Brian stepped forward, positioning himself between the aliens and his team. "We mean you no harm," he called out, his voice steady and clear. "Can you understand me?" The lead Krelthax, a towering figure with iridescent scales, tilted its head. When it spoke, its voice was a mix of guttural clicks and recognizable words. "We understand. What done to us?" Brian felt Zera's hand on his arm. He glanced at her, noting the furrowed concentration on her face. "I can sense their emotions," she whispered. "Confusion, fear, but the overwhelming aggression is gone." Nodding, Brian turned back to the Krelthax. "We activated an ancient device. It seems to have changed you. We want to help you understand what's happened." As Brian began the delicate process of establishing a dialogue with the transformed Krelthax, Captain Lorana and Commander Vasquez huddled around a holographic display. Data streams scrolled past, painting a picture of the recoder's far-reaching effects. The energy wave didn't just affect the forces here, Lorana murmured, her eyes wide. It's spreading through the nearby star systems. Every Krelthax in range is undergoing the same transformation. Vasquez's expression hardened. We need to secure this device. If it falls into the wrong hands... Her words were cut short by a blaring alarm. The chamber's ancient systems sprang to life, projecting a massive hologram of the planet and surrounding space. A new contact had appeared, a ship of unprecedented size. What is that? Brian asked, breaking away from his conversation with the Krelthax. One of the Lumina experts stepped forward, awe evident in their voice. It's a galactic conclave vessel. They've never intervened in this conflict before. As the team watched, a smaller craft detached from the massive ship, descending toward the planet's surface. Brian felt a knot form in his stomach. The already complex situation had just become infinitely more complicated. Incoming transmission, Vasquez announced, her fingers flying over a control panel. A holographic figure materialized in the center of the chamber. A tall, elegant alien with shimmering, translucent skin and multiple eyes. When it spoke, its voice resonated with authority and concern. I am High Arbiter Xandar of the Galactic Conclave. We have detected a massive energy surge in the activation of prohibited ancient technology. I request an immediate audience with your leaders. Brian exchanged glances with Zera, whose skin now pulsed with a mix of anticipation and worry. The arrival of the Galactic Conclave had changed the game entirely. As Xandar's shuttle touched down outside the ancient structure, Brian realized that their actions had catapulted them onto a galactic stage, with consequences that would ripple across the stars. He took a deep breath, squaring his shoulders. Captain Lorana, Commander Vasquez with me. Zera, I need you by my side. His voice softened as he looked at her. Your empathic abilities might be crucial in navigating this. As they made their way to meet the High Arbiter, Brian couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. The genetic recoder had opened a Pandora's box, and now they would have to face the consequences, for better or worse. The team stepped out of the ancient structure, the transformed Krelthax forming an uncertain perimeter around them. In the distance, the sleek shuttle of the Galactic Conclave gleamed in the planet's alien sunlight, a harbinger of the challenges that lay ahead. The air crackled with tension as High Arbiter Xandar's imposing figure emerged from the shuttle, flanked by a retinue of Conclave officials. Before Brian could address the new arrivals, the ground beneath their feet trembled. A low rumble resonated through the air, growing in intensity with each passing second. Brian instinctively reached for Zera, steadying her as she swayed. What's happening? Commander Vasquez called out, her hand hovering over her weapon. Their question was answered as the landscape around them began to shift. Ancient structures, long buried beneath the planet's surface, emerged from the ground with a grinding of stone and metal. Spires of gleaming alloy pierced the sky, while vast complexes unfurled like blooming flowers made of technology beyond their comprehension. Captain Lorana's eyes widened in awe. It's a planetary defense system, she breathed, her scientific mind already racing to understand the implications. High Arbiter Xandar's multiple eyes blinked rapidly, taking in the unfolding spectacle. This complicates matters, he intoned, his voice a mix of concern and fascination. Brian's tactical mind immediately grasped the potential of this discovery. We need to explore these facilities, he said, turning to his team. Commander Vasquez, take a team east. Captain Lorana, you head west with the Lumina experts. I'll lead a group to the central complex. As the teams prepared to move out, Brian noticed Zera's skin pulsing with an intense glow. Are you all right? He asked, concern evident in his voice. Zera nodded, her eyes fixed on the nearest structure. I can feel them, Brian. These buildings, they're alive with energy. Stay close to me, Brian said, unwilling to let her out of his sight given her ongoing changes. He turned to address High Arbiter Xandar. We invite the Conclave to observe our exploration efforts. This technology could be crucial in our fight against the Krelthax. Xander nodded solemnly. We shall accompany your team to the central complex. The conclave must assess the full extent of this discovery. As they approached the massive central structure, Brian's team encountered their first obstacle, a shimmering energy field blocking their path. Zera stepped forward, her skin rippling with colors. She reached out, her fingers brushing against the barrier. To everyone's amazement, the field parted like a curtain, allowing them passage. How did you do that? Brian asked, marveling at Zera's evolving abilities. She shook her head, looking as surprised as the others. I'm not sure. It's like the system recognized me somehow. As they delved deeper into the complex, they faced increasingly sophisticated defenses. Laser grids crisscrossed corridors. Gravity fluctuated wildly in certain chambers, and swarms of nanobots buzzed menacingly in the air. Brian's military experience proved invaluable as he guided the team through these hazards, his instincts honed by years of combat. Zera's newfound abilities continued to develop at an astonishing rate. She seemed to intuitively understand the ancient technology, deactivating traps and unlocking sealed doors with mere gestures. However, each interaction left her visibly drained, her skin flickering like a faltering light. Zera, you need to rest, Brian insisted after she collapsed against him, her breath coming in ragged gasps. She shook her head stubbornly. We can't stop now. We're close to something. I can feel it. Their perseverance was rewarded when they entered a vast chamber that dwarfed anything they had seen before. At its center stood a towering crystalline structure, pulsing with energy that made the air itself feel alive. Zera's eyes locked onto the crystal, and before Brian could stop her, she stumbled towards it. Zera, wait, he called out, but it was too late. As her hand touched the crystal's surface, Zera's body went rigid. Her eyes rolled back, revealing only whites as energy coursed through her. Brian rushed to her side, grabbing her arm to pull her away. The moment he made contact, the energy surged through him as well. Brian's world exploded into light and sensation. His mind expanded, suddenly aware of the entire planetary network. He saw the teams led by Vasquez and Lorana, exploring vast hangars filled with advanced spacecraft and production facilities capable of replicating the genetic recoder technology. He felt the transformed Krelthax, their confusion and fear as they grappled with their new identities. And then at the edges of his consciousness, he sensed something else, a vast, dark presence approaching, the Krelthax reinforcement fleet, larger and more terrifying than anything they had faced before. With a monumental effort, Brian tore himself and Zera away from the crystal. They collapsed to the ground, gasping for air. As Brian's vision cleared, he realized his skin now emitted a faint glow, mirroring Zera's transformed state. High Arbiter Xandar loomed over them, his expression a mix of awe and apprehension. What have you done? He demanded. Before Brian could respond, alarms blared throughout the complex. A holographic display materialized, showing the approaching Krelthax armada. They had days at most before the enemy would be upon them. Brian met Zera's eyes, a silent understanding passing between them. Their bond had deepened beyond words, their minds now linked in ways they were only beginning to understand. Together they rose to face the challenges ahead, knowing that the fate of not just their world, but the entire galaxy now rested on their shoulders. As they turned to the ancient controls, intent on unlocking the full potential of the planetary defense system, Brian couldn't shake the feeling that their greatest trials were yet to come. The transformed Krelthax, the galactic conclave, the approaching enemy fleet, each presented a unique challenge that would test their newfound abilities and fragile alliances to their limits. Brian's mind raced as he processed the flood of information from his connection with the crystal. The approaching Krelthax fleet loomed like a dark cloud on the horizon of his consciousness. He turned to Zera, their shared experience creating an unspoken bond between them. We need to act fast, he said, his voice filled with urgency. The Krelthax are coming, and we're not ready. Zera nodded, her luminescent skin pulsing with tenacity. I can feel it too. The planetary defense system, it's waiting for us to take control. High Arbiter Xander's multiple eyes blinked rapidly, his translucent skin shimmering with concern. What you propose is dangerous. This technology is beyond our understanding. Brian stepped toward the ancient controls, his newly transformed body resonating with the energy around him. We don't have a choice. If we don't use these defenses, the Krelthax will overwhelm us. As Brian and Zera worked in tandem, their movements synchronized with an almost supernatural precision. The orbital defense platforms hummed to life. Massive energy weapons, dormant for millennia, charged with crackling power. Commander Vasquez's voice crackled over the comm system. Brian, we've got movement in the transformed Krelthax. Some of them are showing signs of reverting. Brian's heart sank. Understood. Get Dr. Frost on it immediately. We need those changes stabilized. In a makeshift laboratory hastily set up in one of the ancient facilities, Dr. Elias Frost hunched over a complex array of equipment. His eyes were bloodshot from lack of sleep, but his hands moved with practiced precision as he worked to create a more permanent version of the genetic recoder's effects. Commander Vasquez stood nearby, her weapon at the ready as she eyed the group of anxious Krelthax huddled in the corner. How's it coming, Doctor? Frost didn't look up from his work. I'm close, but we need more time. Time was a luxury they didn't have. In another part of the complex, Captain Lorana oversaw the production of miniaturized genetic recoders. The Lumina experts worked tirelessly, their ethereal forms moving with fluid grace as they assembled the devices. First batch is ready, Lorana announced, holding up a small, gleaming projectile. Let's hope they work as intended. High Arbiter Xandar paced the central command center, his unease palpable. The conclave cannot condone the use of untested weapons on this scale. The potential for disaster is too great. Before Brian could respond, a new transmission cut through the tense atmosphere. A holographic image materialized in the center of the room, revealing the imposing figure of Admiral Korovex. Her voice, a blend of guttural clicks and synthesized speech, filled the air. This is Admiral Korovex of the Krelthax fleet. Surrender the planet and all its technology immediately, or face total annihilation. Brian stepped forward, drawing on years of diplomatic experience. Admiral Korovex, I am Brian Chen of Earth. We have no quarrel with your people. In fact, we've made a discovery that could change everything for the Krelthax. As Brian spoke, Zera focused her enhanced empathic abilities on the Admiral. She sensed a swirl of emotions beneath the alien's stern exterior. Confusion, uncertainty, and a flicker of hope? What discovery? Korovex demanded, her multiple eyes narrowing. We've found a way to free your people from their parasitic existence, Brian explained. Many of the Krelthax here have already been transformed. They're no longer driven by the need to conquer and consume. A flicker of doubt crossed the Admiral's face, quickly replaced by steely willpower. You lie. This is a trick to delay us. As the negotiation continued, Dr. Frost burst into the command center, his face flushed with excitement. I've done it! I've created a self-replicating version of the recoder's effects. If we can introduce this to the Krelthax fleet's central biocomputer, it could spread throughout their entire species. Brian's mind raced with possibilities. A plan began to form, daring and potentially suicidal, but perhaps their only chance. He turned to the group, his eyes blazing with intensity. We need to get a team onto the Krelthax flagship. We'll use one of the advanced ships we found in the hangar. It's our only shot at ending this war for good. The room erupted into a cacophony of voices. Commander Vasquez immediately volunteered to lead the ground defense. Captain Lorana, though hesitant, agreed to provide technical support. High Arbiter Xandar vehemently opposed the plan, arguing that it was too risky. As the debate raged, long-range sensors blared a warning. The first wave of the Krelthax fleet had entered the system, hundreds of ships moving into attack formation. Suddenly, Zera collapsed, her body convulsing as waves of psychic energy washed over her. Brian rushed to her side, cradling her as her skin became translucent, revealing a network of glowing energy beneath. When Zera's eyes snapped open, they blazed with an otherworldly light. I can see them, she whispered. I can feel the defenses. They're part of me now. With a gesture from Zera, the planetary defenses sprang to life with unprecedented speed and accuracy. Energy shields flickered into existence, intercepting Krelthak's weapons with pinpoint precision. Defense platforms returned fire, their beams slicing through enemy ships with devastating effect. Brian made his decision. Despite the risks, despite Xandar's objections, they had to act. "Prepare the ship," he ordered. "We're going in." As Brian, Zera, and their hand-picked team boarded the sleek alien craft, the space above the planet erupted into chaos. Energy beams crisscrossed the void. Explosions bloomed like silent flowers against the backdrop of stars. Brian and Zera took their positions at the ship's controls, their transformed bodies resonating with the advanced technology. As the hangar doors slid open, revealing the furious battle raging overhead, they shared a moment of connection deeper than words. With a burst of energy, the ship launched into space, weaving through the melee with impossible agility. Brian set course for the heart of the Krelthak's fleet, where the massive flagship loomed like a predator among prey. As they accelerated towards their uncertain fate, Brian allowed himself a moment of grim reflection. Everything hinged on this mission: the fate of the planet, the future of the Krelthaks, perhaps the balance of power in the galaxy itself. The true test of their newfound abilities and fragile alliances lay ahead, in the cold, unforgiving void of space. Space itself seemed to bend around their ship as it accelerated towards the heart of the Krelthak's fleet. Brian's hands danced across the alien controls, every movement precise and deliberate. Zera sat beside him, her eyes closed in deep concentration as she interfaced with the ship's systems. The void erupted into chaos as they entered the fray. Energy beams lanced through space, striking shields and hulls with devastating force. Explosions bloomed silently, debris scattering in every direction. Brian weaved through the melee with impossible agility, the ship responding to his commands as if it were an extension of his own body. "Incoming!" shouted one of the team members. A swarm of interceptor drones converged on their position, their weapons primed to fire. Brian's enhanced reflexes kicked in. He sent the ship into a spiraling dive, narrowly avoiding the first volley of shots. Zera's eyes snapped open, glowing with an otherworldly light. "I can see their attack patterns," she said, her voice carrying an otherworldly resonance. "Banking left. Now!" The ship veered sharply, threading the needle between two converging squadrons of drones. The attackers collided in a brilliant explosion, creating a momentary shield against the incoming fire. As they pushed deeper into enemy territory, the Krelthak's defenses intensified. Massive energy cannons tracked their approach, filling space with a web of destructive power. "We can't take much more of this," Dr. Frost's voice crackled over the comm. "The ship's shields are at 30% and falling." Zera's form began to shift, her skin taking on a metallic sheen. "I'm going deeper," she announced, her voice distorted. Before Brian could protest, Zera's consciousness merged fully with the ship's AI. The effect was immediate and startling. The ship's movements became fluid, almost organic. It anticipated attacks before they happened, slipping through gaps in the Krelthak's defenses that seemed to appear out of nowhere. But the strain on Zera was evident. Her body flickered between different alien physiologies, each lasting only seconds before shifting to another. Sweat beaded on her brow, and her breathing came in ragged gasps. "Zera, you need to pull back," Brian urged, his concern evident in his voice. She shook her head, her eyes still closed. "Almost there." The massive bulk of the Krelthak's flagship loomed before them, dwarfing every other ship in the fleet. Its surface pulsed with an eerie bioluminescence, organic curves blending seamlessly with mechanical precision. As they approached, Brian noticed a shimmering field surrounding the flagship. "What is that?" he muttered, adjusting their course to avoid it. Dr. Frost's voice came through, tense with urgency. "It's a nanobot field. Don't let it touch the ship." But it was too late. Their momentum carried them straight into the microscopic swarm. The ship shuddered as the nanobots began to infiltrate its systems. Zera cried out in pain, her body convulsing as she fought against the invading presence. Brian watched in amazement as her form became fluid, shifting rapidly between different alien physiologies. He felt a change within himself as well. His muscles tensed and relaxed, growing denser and more responsive. His vision sharpened, allowing him to perceive details he'd never noticed before. With his newly enhanced abilities, Brian piloted the ship through the nanobot field with inhuman precision. Every movement was calculated to minimize contact with the swarm, every course correction timed to perfection. They emerged on the other side, the ship's systems stabilizing as Zera regained control. Her body settled into a new form, her skin now covered in iridescent scales that seemed to absorb and refract light. "There," Brian said, pointing to a less defended section near the flagship's stern. "That docking bay looks like our best shot." Using debris from destroyed ships as cover, Brian navigated towards their target. The transformed Krelthax members of their team provided crucial information, identifying weak points and blind spots in the flagship's defenses. With a final burst of speed, they slipped into the docking bay moments before massive doors slammed shut behind them. Inside the Krelthax ship, they were confronted by a nightmarish landscape. Organic corridors pulsed and shifted, the walls themselves seeming alive. The air was thick with spores, visible even to the naked eye. "Masks on," Brian ordered, sealing his protective suit. "We don't know what these spores might do to us." They moved cautiously through the ship's interior, guided by Zera's enhanced empathic abilities. She led them away from large concentrations of Krelthax forces, her face contorted in concentration as she fought against the overwhelming alien presence that permeated the ship. Suddenly, they rounded a corner and found themselves face to face with a squad of Krelthax warriors. The aliens were more machine than organic, their bodies a terrifying fusion of flesh and metal. Brian's enhanced physique proved invaluable as the battle erupted. He moved with blinding speed, his strikes precise and devastatingly effective. The rest of the team fought with equal ferocity, their transformed bodies and advanced weapons giving them an edge against the Krelthax. As they fought their way deeper into the ship, Zera guided them toward the central chamber housing the flagship's primary biocomputer. But as they approached their objective, a towering figure blocked their path. Admiral Korovek stood before them, her body a nightmarish amalgamation of organic and mechanical parts. Multiple eyes blinked in unison as she regarded the intruders. "You dare to invade my ship?" Korovek's voice was a guttural growl, amplified by mechanical implants. "Your foolishness ends here." The Admiral raised her arm, activating a ship-wide alert. The walls themselves seemed to vibrate as hordes of Krelthax warriors began converging on their position. Brian quickly assessed the situation. They were running out of time, and their chances of fighting through the entire ship's complement were slim. "New plan," he announced, his mind racing. "I'll lead the team in holding off the Krelthax. Zera, you need to interface directly with the biocomputer. It's our only shot at implementing Dr. Frost's solution." Zera nodded, her body already beginning to shift in anticipation of the connection. As Brian and the team engaged the approaching Krelthax forces, she made her way towards the pulsating core of the biocomputer. The chamber erupted into chaos. Brian's enhanced body moved with fluid grace, each movement precisely calculated for maximum effect. The rest of the team fought with equal drive, their weapons creating a storm of energy blasts and explosions. Through the chaos, Brian caught glimpses of Zera as she approached the biocomputer. Her body had become a swirling mass of energy and matter, barely recognizable as humanoid. As she made contact with the alien system, a pulse of energy radiated outward, momentarily stunning everyone in the chamber. Zera's consciousness expanded across the entire Krelthax network, touching the minds of billions of parasitic entities. Her physical form seemed to dissolve, becoming one with the ship's systems. Brian felt a surge of both awe and fear as he watched Zera's transformation. The fate of their mission, perhaps of the entire galaxy, now rested on her ability to implement Dr. Frost's solution while maintaining her own identity against the crushing weight of the Krelthax hive mind. As another wave of Krelthax warriors poured into the chamber, Brian steeled himself for the fight of his life. The battle raged on, the outcome hanging in the balance, with Zera's merged consciousness at the center of it all. Zera's merged consciousness teetered on the edge of oblivion, struggling against the crushing weight of the Krelthak's hive mind. In that moment of crisis, Zera's physical form began to change. Her body, already a swirling mass of energy and matter, coalesced into a pulsating vortex at the center of the chamber. The air crackled with an otherworldly energy, causing the hair on Brian's arms to stand on end. Brian ducked under a Krelthak's warrior strike, his enhanced reflexes allowing him to retaliate with lightning speed. As he fought, he kept glancing back at Zera's transformed state, a knot of fear tightening in his gut. The transformed Krelthak's allies began to falter. One of them, a towering figure named Krelvor, suddenly dropped to his knees, his body contorting grotesquely. "Something's wrong," Krelvor gasped, his voice distorted by pain. "The old programming, it's resurfacing." Brian watched in horror as Krelvor's form twisted and shifted, the carefully engineered changes to his physiology unraveling before their eyes. The other transformed Krelthaks soon followed, their bodies warping as they fought against their original nature. Admiral Korovek seized the opportunity, her multiple eyes gleaming with triumph. She raised her mechanized arm, activating a hidden command system within the ship. The effect was immediate and terrifying. The organic corridors of the flagship began to pulse and contract, secreting a viscous, smoking fluid. The acrid smell of corrosion filled the air as the liquid ate through the team's protective gear. "Fall back," Brian shouted, firing his weapon to clear a path through the encroaching Krelthak's forces. "We need to regroup." As the team retreated, Brian's mind raced. They were losing ground, their allies were compromised, and Zera was still vulnerable in her merged state. He knew he had to act fast. Making a split-second decision, Brian broke away from the group and sprinted towards the swirling vortex that was Zera. He could feel the energy emanating from her transformed state, causing his skin to tingle and his vision to blur. "What are you doing?" Dr. Frost's voice crackled over the comm, panic evident in his tone. Brian didn't respond. He reached out, his fingers inches away from the pulsating energy field. In that moment, he felt a surge of connection with Zera, a bond that transcended their physical forms. Without hesitation, Brian stepped into the vortex. The sensation was indescribable. Brian felt his body breaking down at the molecular level, his consciousness expanding and merging with Zera's. Their memories, thoughts, and very essence intertwined, creating something entirely new. The hybrid entity that emerged from this fusion spread through the Krelthak's network like wildfire. It moved with the speed of human thought, the adaptability of Zera's Lurian heritage, and the raw power of their shared transformation. Throughout the Krelthak's fleet, ships began to power down. Confused voices filled the communication channels as crews suddenly found themselves free from the parasitic influence that had controlled them for so long. Admiral Korovek stumbled, her cybernetic implants sparking as the changes rippled through her body and mind. What's happening to me?" she growled, her voice losing its mechanical edge. On the planet's surface, Dr. Frost and his team watched in awe as their sensors detected massive genetic shifts throughout the Krelthak's fleet. "It's working," Dr. Frost breathed, his eyes wide with disbelief. "They've actually done it." But their celebration was short-lived. Alarms blared as the sensors picked up alarming energy fluctuations from the Krelthak's flagship. "Those readings can't be right," one of the scientists muttered, frantically recalibrating the equipment. Dr. Frost's face paled as he realized the implications. The merger of Brian and Zera, it's causing a cascade effect in the ship's systems. In orbit, the flagship's biocomputer began to overload. Energy surged through its organic circuitry, threatening to trigger a chain reaction that could obliterate everything in its path. Commander Vasquez's voice cut through the chaos. "All friendly forces, evacuate the Krelthak's ships immediately. This is not a drill." Captain Lorana, working with a team of Lumina engineers, activated the newly unearthed ancient technology. Shimmering portals winked into existence, allowing for rapid extraction of personnel from the destabilizing vessels. Inside the flagship's central chamber, the energy vortex that was once Brian and Zera began to take shape. It fluctuated between recognizable aspects of both individuals, as if struggling to find a stable form. The hybrid entity, now possessing knowledge spanning multiple species and the vast Krelthax database, understood the danger they faced. With unparalleled control over energy and matter, it began to construct a containment field around the overloading biocomputer. Outside, the transformed Krelthax joined the evacuation efforts. Admiral Korovex, her mind clear for the first time in ages, coordinated with Commander Vasquez to ensure the safety of both fleets. As the biocomputer reached critical mass, the Zera entity completed its work. The containment field snapped into place just as the overload reached its peak. The resulting implosion was like nothing anyone had ever seen. The flagship collapsed in on itself, the energy barrier holding firm against the tremendous forces at play. A shockwave rippled through space, temporarily blinding sensors and disrupting communications across the battlefield. When the distortion cleared, the Krelthax fleet hung motionless in space. The crews, newly transformed and free from parasitic control, were left to grapple with their newfound freedom and the weight of their past actions. On the planet, Dr. Frost and his team worked tirelessly to understand the full scope of the changes wrought by their genetic solution and the mysterious energy released during the implosion. As the dust settled, a tense silence fell over the battlefield. The fate of Brian and Zera remained unknown, lost in the cataclysmic event that had reshaped the Krelthax and potentially the balance of power in the galaxy. Commander Vasquez's voice broke the silence, her tone grim but determined. Launch search and rescue operations. We need to find out if there are any survivors from that flagship. As teams began to comb through the debris field, questions hung heavy in the air. What had become of Brian and Zera? Could they have survived such an event? And if they had, in what form would they return? The transformed Krelthax, the planet's defenders, and the newly arrived galactic conclave representatives all waited anxiously for news. They knew that whatever was found among the wreckage could change the course of interspecies relations forever. As the search continued, the vastness of space seemed to hold its breath, waiting to reveal the next chapter in this unprecedented cosmic drama. The tense silence that had fallen over the battlefield was shattered by a flurry of activity as search and rescue operations commenced. Commander Vasquez's voice crackled over the comm channels, coordinating the efforts of both the planet's defenders and the newly transformed Krelthax. All available ships form search patterns across the debris field, she ordered, her tone steady despite the gravity of the situation. We're looking for any signs of Brian and Zera. Be thorough, but exercise extreme caution. As the hours ticked by without success, frustration and worry began to mount. Dr. Frost, monitoring the search from the planet's surface, pored over sensor data with growing desperation. Suddenly, his eyes widened as an anomalous energy signature appeared on his screens. Commander Vasquez, we've detected something unusual, he reported, his fingers flying over the controls to refine the data. There's a concentrated energy reading coming from a dense cluster of debris at coordinates 227 Mark IV. Captain Lorana, who had been coordinating with the Lumina engineers, stepped forward. We can use the ancient technology to create a stable wormhole to that location. It will allow a rescue team to reach the area quickly. Within minutes, a shimmering portal winked into existence near the debris cluster. A specialized team, equipped with the latest in protective gear and scanning technology, emerged from the wormhole. What they found defied explanation. A pulsating cocoon of energy hung suspended among the twisted remnants of the Krelthax flagship. It radiated a soft, otherworldly glow that seemed to shift and swirl with unseen currents. We've located the source of the energy signature, the team leader reported back. It's unlike anything we've ever seen. Our scanners can't penetrate it, and physical contact seems inadvisable. After several failed attempts to analyze or interact with the cocoon, the decision was made to carefully extract it and bring it back to the planet for further study. Using a combination of tractor beams and energy fields, the team slowly maneuvered the enigmatic object through the wormhole. In a secure facility nestled within the ancient ruins, Dr. Frost and a team of Lumina scientists worked around the clock to unravel the mystery of the energy cocoon. They subjected it to a battery of tests, exposing it to various stimuli in hopes of triggering a response. Days passed without progress, the cocoon remaining stubbornly inert. Frustration mounted as each new attempt yielded no results. It was Captain Lorana who finally suggested a different approach. "What if we try using one of the ancient devices?" she proposed. "Their technology operates on principles we're only beginning to understand. It might be able to interact with the cocoon in ways our equipment can't." Dr. Frost nodded, his exhaustion momentarily forgotten in a surge of renewed hope. "It's worth a try. Let's start with the harmonic resonator we discovered in the eastern chamber." As they activated the device, a low hum filled the air. At first, nothing seemed to happen. Then, almost imperceptibly, the cocoon began to pulse in sync with the resonator's frequency. "Look," one of the Lumina scientists exclaimed, pointing at the monitoring equipment. "The energy patterns are shifting." Before their eyes, the cocoon began to unravel, its swirling energies coalescing into two distinct forms. As the last wisps of energy dissipated, Brian and Zera were revealed, unconscious but unmistakably alive. The room erupted into a flurry of activity as medical teams rushed to assess their condition. Despite the ordeal they had endured, both appeared to be in perfect physical health. However, it was immediately apparent that they had been fundamentally changed by their experience. Brian's skin now possessed a subtle luminescence, reminiscent of Zera's natural bioluminescence. Zera, in turn, had undergone a more dramatic transformation. Her form had stabilized into a mesmerizing blend of human and Lurian features, her alien beauty now tempered with unmistakably human characteristics. As the medical teams worked to stabilize Brian and Zera, Dr. Frost began a preliminary analysis of their genetic makeup. What he found left him speechless. "This is incredible," he muttered, staring at the results in disbelief. "Their DNA has become intricately linked. There are sequences here that are a perfect blend of human and Lurian genes. I've never seen anything like it." Outside the facility, news of Brian and Zera's recovery spread rapidly. The transformed Krelthax, led by Admiral Korovex, gathered near the entrance, their faces a mixture of awe and gratitude. Earth's governments demanded constant updates, while representatives from the galactic conclave prepared for the implications of this unprecedented event. Commander Vasquez, recognizing the potential for chaos, took charge of the situation. She coordinated with Captain Lorana and Admiral Korovex to maintain order, ensuring that the various factions present on the planet didn't interfere with the ongoing recovery efforts. A week passed, filled with tense waiting and feverish research. Then, without warning, Brian and Zera began to stir. As their eyes fluttered open, the room fell silent, everyone holding their breath in anticipation. Brian's gaze found Zera's, and in that moment, something extraordinary happened. Without a word spoken, a wave of emotion passed between them, visible to all in the room as a faint shimmer in the air. "Zera," Brian whispered, his voice hoarse from disuse. "I can feel you. In my mind." Zera nodded, tears welling in her eyes. "I know. I feel you too. It's like we're still connected somehow." As they began to explore this new bond, Dr. Frost approached cautiously. "Brian, Zera," he said softly. "How do you feel? Do you remember what happened?" The couple exchanged a look, their faces mirroring identical expressions of confusion and wonder. "It's all jumbled," Brian replied. "Flashes of something vast, knowledge beyond anything we could comprehend." Zera nodded in agreement. "We were everything and nothing, the entire Krelthax network, and yet still ourselves. It's hard to put into words." As they spoke, Brian absently reached out to touch the medical equipment beside his bed. To everyone's shock, the machine sprang to life, its interface responding to his mere touch as if he were its creator. Simultaneously, the objects around Zera's bed began to tremble and rise, floating gently in the air as if gravity had lost its hold. She gasped, concentrating, and the items settled back into place. Dr. Frost's eyes widened as he witnessed these displays of newfound abilities. "Fascinating," he breathed. "It seems the hybridization process has activated dormant genetic sequences, granting you abilities that blur the line between biology and technology." Before they could explore these new powers further, Commander Vasquez entered the room, her face grave. "I'm glad to see you both awake," she said, but I'm afraid we don't have much time for recovery. The galactic conclave has called for an emergency summit to address recent events, and they're requesting your presence." Brian and Zera exchanged another wordless glance, their new connection allowing them to communicate volumes in an instant. They turned back to Commander Vasquez, their faces set with tenacity. "We'll go," Brian said firmly. Zera nodded in agreement. "We have a responsibility to explain what happened and to help shape what comes next." As preparations for their journey began, Brian and Zera found themselves at the center of a whirlwind of activity. Representatives from various factions vied for their attention, each seeking to understand the implications of their transformation. Through it all, they clung to each other, their newfound bond at anchor in the storm of galactic politics. As they boarded the ship that would take them to the Conclave Summit, they knew that the greatest challenge of their lives lay ahead. The future of interspecies relations hung in the balance, and their actions would determine the course of galactic history. The ship's engines hummed to life, and as they lifted off from the planet's surface, Brian and Zera stood hand in hand, ready to face whatever the universe had in store for them next. As the ship carrying Brian and Zera lifted off from the planet's surface, the gravity of their mission settled upon them. The journey to the Galactic Conclave Summit would be unlike anything they had experienced before, even considering the extraordinary events of recent days. No sooner had they entered orbit than Dr. Frost's voice came through the ship's communication system. "Brian, Zera, I need you both in the medical bay immediately. We must conduct a thorough examination before we leave the system." They made their way through the ship's corridors, marveling at the seamless integration of various alien technologies. Upon entering the medical bay, they found Dr. Frost waiting alongside a woman they didn't recognize. "This is Dr. Alara Venn," Frost introduced, gesturing to his colleague. "She's a xenobiologist from Earth, here to assist with your case." Dr. Venn stepped forward, her eyes alight with curiosity. "It's an honor to meet you both. Your transformation is unprecedented in the field of interspecies genetics." Over the next several hours, Brian and Zera underwent a battery of tests. They stood in advanced scanning chambers, provided tissue samples, and demonstrated their newfound abilities under carefully controlled conditions. "Remarkable," Dr. Venn murmured, reviewing the results. "Your cellular structure shows an incredible ability to adapt and regenerate. It's as if your bodies have become living laboratories, capable of rewriting their own genetic code on the fly." Dr. Frost nodded in agreement. "This adaptability could prove crucial during your interstellar journey. Your bodies should be able to adjust to various environments with minimal discomfort." As the medical team continued their analysis, Commander Vasquez entered the bay, accompanied by a diverse group of individuals. "Brian, Zera, I'd like you to meet your protection detail," she announced. The team consisted of battle-hardened human soldiers, their posture rigid and alert. Alongside them stood several transformed Krelthaks, their bodies a testament to the recent changes they had undergone. Completing the group were Lumina security experts, their bioluminescent skin pulsing with impossibly strong energy. "We've assembled the best of the best," Vasquez explained. "They'll ensure your safety throughout this mission." As the day of departure arrived, Brian and Zera boarded the Unity, a ship that embodied the spirit of cooperation they hoped to foster at the summit. Its sleek design incorporated elements from multiple species, creating a harmonious blend of form and function. Once on board, Brian discovered an unexpected side effect of his transformation. As he ran his hand along a control panel, the ship's systems sprang to life, responding to his touch as if he were an extension of the vessel itself. "Zera, look at this!" he called out, his voice filled with wonder. Brian closed his eyes, focusing his thoughts, and the ship's navigation system displayed a detailed star chart on the main view screen. Zera watched in amazement, then gasped as she felt a surge of Brian's excitement through their mental link. The intensity of the sensation caught her off guard, causing nearby objects to float momentarily before she regained control. As the Unity broke free of the planet's gravitational pull, Brian and Zera retreated to their private quarters. The shared mental link between them had grown stronger, and they found themselves overwhelmed by the flood of emotions and memories. "It's like I can see through your eyes," Zera whispered, her hand intertwined with Brian's. I can feel what you felt when we first met. Brian nodded, his voice thick with emotion. And I can sense your thoughts, your fears, your hopes. It's incredible, but also a little scary. They spent hours exploring this new facet of their relationship, learning to navigate the intricacies of their shared consciousness. The experience brought them closer than ever before, their bond transcending the physical and entering a realm of pure emotional and mental intimacy. As the Unity approached the massive space station hosting the Galactic Conclave Summit, they encountered a sea of ships. Vessels of all shapes and sizes formed a dense blockade, each seeking to be the first to make contact with the hybrid couple. The protection detail sprang into action. Human soldiers coordinated with Conclave security, while Krelthak's team members used their knowledge of various ship designs to identify potential threats. Lumina experts employed their natural abilities to create a subtle energy field around the Unity, deflecting overzealous approach attempts. Despite the chaos, the Unity successfully navigated through the crowded space and docked at the station. As the airlock cycled open, Brian and Zera took a deep breath, steeling themselves for what lay ahead. They stepped onto the station's deck, immediately drawing the attention of everyone present. A hush fell over the assembled crowd as they took in the sight of the hybrid couple. Brian's skin shimmered with a subtle luminescence, while Zera's form was a mesmerizing blend of human and Lurian features. High Arbiter Xandar stepped forward, his multifaceted eyes reflecting a mix of curiosity and caution. On behalf of the Galactic Conclave, I welcome you to our humble station, he intoned, his translator conveying the formal greeting. As they were led through the station's winding corridors, Brian's enhanced senses picked up on subtle security measures hidden within the walls. Zera, meanwhile, found herself bombarded by the emotions of the delegates they passed, a swirling mixture of awe, fear, and anticipation. Their suite, when they reached it, was a marvel of adaptive technology. The environment shifted subtly as they entered, adjusting temperature, gravity, and atmospheric composition to their unique physiology. No sooner had they settled in than a secure communication channel activated. Commander Vasquez's face appeared on the screen, her expression grim. We've got a situation developing, she reported. A faction of untransformed Krelthaks has been detected rallying forces in a distant sector. We're monitoring the situation, but you need to be aware of this as you enter negotiations. Brian and Zera exchanged a worried glance, the weight of their responsibility settling heavily upon them. They had little time to dwell on this new threat, however, as a team of advisors arrived to brief them on the complex political landscape they were about to enter. For hours, they absorbed information on the various factions present at the summit, the alliances and rivalries that define galactic politics, and the potential consequences of their every word and action. As the time for their first official appearance approached, Brian and Zera stood before the doors to the main assembly hall. The murmur of hundreds of delegates filtered through, a cacophony of languages and species, all gathered to see them. Brian reached out, taking Zera's hand in his. Through their mental link, they shared a moment of perfect understanding. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. The doors began to slide open, revealing the vast chamber beyond. Thousands of eyes turned to focus on them, and the din of conversation fell to a hushed silence. With a shared breath, Brian and Zera stepped forward, ready to play their part in shaping the future of galactic relations. Civilization. With a shared breath, Brian and Zera stepped forward, ready to play their part in shaping the future of galactic relations. The massive doors of the main assembly hall parted, revealing a vast chamber filled with representatives from countless worlds. As Brian and Zera entered, a hush fell over the crowd. Thousands of eyes, some human, others decidedly alien, focused on the hybrid couple. Brian felt a surge of nervous energy course through him, his skin shimmering with a subtle luminescence in response. Beside him, Zera's form seemed to blur slightly at the edges, her unique blend of human and Lurian features captivating the assembled delegates. High Arbiter, Xandar's multifaceted eyes glinted as he stepped forward to address the assembly. Esteemed representatives of the Galactic Conclave, his translator intoned, I present to you Brian Chen and Zera, the key figures in the resolution of the Krelthax conflict and subjects of an unprecedented genetic transformation. As Xander continued his introduction, detailing the events that had led to this moment, Zera's empathic abilities flared to life. The emotional atmosphere of the room washed over her in waves. Awe, curiosity, fear, and suspicion swirled around her like a tempest. "Brian," she whispered, her voice tense, "the crowd is volatile. We need to tread carefully." Brian nodded, squeezing her hand reassuringly. As they approached the central podium, he reached out with his mind, connecting to the assembly hall's advanced communication systems. The familiar rush of data flooded his consciousness, and with a thought, he activated the holographic projectors. A series of images materialized in the air above the podium, depicting the Krelthax attack, the discovery of the genetic recoder, and the transformation process. Gasps and murmurs rippled through the crowd as the visual evidence unfolded before them. "Wemiyarayam, members of the conclave," Brian began, his voice steady despite the butterflies in his stomach. "We stand before you as living proof of the potential for unity between species. Our transformation has given us unique insights into the nature of life itself." Zera took up the thread, her melodic voice carrying across the chamber. "We've experienced the merging of not just bodies, but minds and cultures. The implications of this technology are vast, but so too are the responsibilities that come with it." As they spoke, Brian became aware of a disturbance at the edge of the crowd. A group of delegates he didn't recognize were pushing their way forward, their faces set in determined expressions. "We are the Vorax," one of them shouted, interrupting Zera mid-sentence, "and we demand immediate access to the genetic recoder technology." The chamber erupted into chaos. Other factions began voicing their own demands, the cacophony of translator devices creating a deafening din. Brian's connection to the communication system became flooded with a barrage of incoming messages and alerts. A Vorax representative broke free from the crowd, lunging toward the podium. In an instant, Brian and Zera's security detail sprang into action, intercepting the charging alien. But as the scuffle intensified, Zera's telekinetic powers activated instinctively. A shimmering barrier of energy materialized around Brian and Zera, pushing back the approaching Vorax and security personnel alike. The display of power sent shockwaves through the assembly. Some delegates recoiled in fear, while others leaned forward, their eyes gleaming with increased interest. "Order! I demand order!" High Arbiter Xandar's amplified voice boomed across the chamber, but it was too late. The assembly had devolved into chaos, with impromptu alliances forming and others declaring their opposition to sharing the ancient technology. Brian's mind raced, trying to process the flood of information from the station's systems, while also grappling with the political storm unfolding around them. Through their mental link, he could feel Zera's struggle to contain her empathic abilities, the maelstrom of emotions threatening to overwhelm her. Suddenly, Dr. Alara Venn appeared at their side, her face etched with urgency. "Brian, Zera, we need to get you out of here," she said, her voice barely audible above the din. "I have critical information about your condition." Before they could respond, a team of security personnel surrounded them, creating a protective formation. With practiced efficiency, they began to escort Brian and Zera towards a side exit. As they moved, Brian caught snippets of heated arguments erupting throughout the chamber. Accusations of favoritism and demands for equal access to the technology flew back and forth between various factions. Just as they reached the exit, Brian's enhanced hearing picked up a familiar voice. He turned to see Earth's representatives pushing through the crowd, calling out to them. "Brian, Zera, you must return to Earth immediately. It's for your own protection." Their words were immediately countered by a group of transformed Krelthax. "No, they belong with us. They are our rightful leaders." The competing demands pulled at Brian and Zera, adding to the sense of disorientation that had begun to creep over them. Their mental link, usually a source of comfort and strength, began to fluctuate wildly. As they stumbled into the relative quiet of a secure chamber adjacent to the main hall, Brian's vision swam. He reached out to steady himself against a wall, only to find his hand passing through solid matter as if it were mist. "Zera," he gasped, "something's wrong. Our connection, it's changing. Zera nodded, her own form seeming to shimmer and shift. I feel it too. It's like we're unraveling. Dr. Venn rushed to their side, her medical scanner whirring to life. The stress of the situation and the unique environment of this station may be affecting the stability of your hybridization, she explained, her brow furrowed in concentration as she analyzed the readings. Before they could process this new development, Admiral Koravex burst into the room, his usually stoic features marred by worry. We have a situation, he announced grimly. The faction of untransformed Krelthax has grown in strength. They're recruiting other species to their cause, promising to restore them to their pure forms. Brian and Zera exchanged a look, the weight of their responsibility settling heavily upon them. Through the haze of their fluctuating connection, a shared thought emerged. They needed to act, and quickly. We need access to the station's main computer core, Brian said, his voice growing stronger as a plan formed in his mind. If we can uncover any hidden information about the ancient civilization that created the genetic recoder, it might give us an edge. Zera nodded in agreement, her eyes glowing with new hope. I'll use my abilities to provide cover if needed. We have to try. As they began to outline their plan to the others, a piercing alarm cut through the air. The room's holographic display flickered to life, showing a massive fleet of ships entering the system. The insignia emblazoned on their hulls sent a chill down Brian's spine. The untransformed Krelthax had arrived. A harsh voice crackled over the station's communication system. This is Commander Vornak of the Pure Krelthax Alliance. Surrender Brian Chen, Zera, and all data related to the genetic recoder immediately or face the consequences. In that moment, as alarms blared and the station buzzed with frantic activity, Brian and Zera stood at the precipice of a decision that would shape the future of the galaxy. Their bodies may have been in flux, their connection unstable, but their commitment remained unshaken. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, for the sake of all species in the cosmos. Galaxy. The weight of their responsibility pressed down upon them, but they stood firm, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. Brian's mind raced, processing the flood of information from the station's systems while formulating a plan. He turned to Dr. Venn, his eyes blazing with tenacity. We need access to the station's main computer core, he said, his voice steady despite the chaos erupting around them. There might be hidden information about the ancient civilization that created the genetic recoder. It could give us an edge. Zera nodded, her form shimmering slightly as she focused her abilities. I'll provide cover if needed. We have to try. Admiral Koravek's face hardened as she assessed the situation. I'll coordinate with security to clear a path to the core, but we must move quickly. As they set their plan in motion, Brian interfaced with the station's systems, his enhanced abilities allowing him to bypass security protocols with ease. The familiar rush of data flooded his consciousness as he delved deeper into the station's digital architecture. Zera moved alongside him, her telekinetic powers at the ready. As they navigated the winding corridors, she created diversions, deflecting attention from Brian's activities. Holographic projections flickered to life, obscuring their movements from prying eyes. The station shuddered as the untransformed Krelthax fleet began its assault. Alarms blared, and the corridors filled with panicked delegates and security personnel rushing to their stations. Brian's connection to the station's systems allowed him to track the progress of the invading forces. They've breached the outer defenses, he reported grimly. Boarding parties are infiltrating multiple levels. Admiral Koravex's voice crackled over the comm system. I'm taking command of the station's defense. We're coordinating with the transformed Krelthax ships to form a protective perimeter. As they approached the computer core, Brian's enhanced senses detected a squad of untransformed Krelthax soldiers ahead. He signaled to Zera, who nodded in understanding. The air shimmered as Zera extended her telekinetic field. With a gesture, she sent a wave of energy surging forward, catching the Krelthax off guard. Brian seized the moment, his hybrid physiology allowing him to move with inhuman speed and agility. The ensuing battle was a blur of motion and energy. Brian's enhanced strength and reflexes allowed him to engage the Krelthax in close combat, while Zera's telekinesis provided crucial support, deflecting enemy fire and creating barriers. As they fought, something extraordinary happened. Their mental link intensified, reaching an unprecedented level of connection. Suddenly, they moved as one, their actions perfectly synchronized. Brian anticipated Zera's telekinetic pushes, using them to propel himself into devastating attacks. Zera sensed Brian's movements, creating force fields exactly where he needed cover. The Krelthax squad, unprepared for such seamless teamwork, fell before their combined might. As the last soldier crumpled to the ground, Brian and Zera exchanged a look of amazement, feeling the power of their newfound harmony. With the path clear, they reached the computer core. Brian's fingers flew over the holographic interface, his mind interfacing directly with the system. Encrypted files began to unlock, revealing the secrets of the ancient civilization that had created the genetic recoder. It was never meant to be a weapon, Brian breathed, his eyes wide as he absorbed the information. The recoder was designed as a tool for peaceful coexistence between species. Zera's expression softened as she processed the implications. This changes everything. We need to get this information to the conclave. As they worked, Dr. Ven's voice came through their comm units, her tone urgent. Brian, Zera, I've made a discovery about your condition. The fluctuations in your mental link, they're not random. They seem to be influenced by the presence of the genetic recoder technology. Brian felt a chill run down his spine. What does that mean for us, Doctor? I'm not certain, Ven replied, her voice tight with concern. But prolonged exposure to the ancient technology might lead to further mutations in your hybrid physiology. We need to monitor you closely. Before they could fully process this new information, the station rocked with another explosion. Admiral Korovex's voice cut through the chaos. The untransformed Krelthax are pushing deeper into the station. We need a plan to push them back. Brian and Zera shared a look, their decision made in an instant of silent communication. We'll lead a counteroffensive, Brian declared. Our abilities give us the best chance of success. As they made their way to the command center to coordinate the counterattack, they encountered a group of Earth's representatives. Their faces were etched with worry as they approached. Brian, one of them pleaded, you must return to Earth immediately. It's for your own protection. We need to study your transformation in a controlled environment. Brian hesitated, feeling the pull of his home planet. But as he looked at Zera, felt the strength of their connection, he knew his path lay forward, not back. I appreciate your concern, he said firmly, but my place is here. The future of the cosmos hangs in the balance. With that, they pushed on, leaving the Earth delegates behind. As they entered the command center, they found Admiral Korovex assembling a team of elite fighters from various species. I'll join you on this mission, the Admiral announced, her eyes gleaming with willpower. My knowledge of Krelthax tactics will be crucial. As the team geared up for their daring counteroffensive, Brian and Zera stood at the center, their hybrid nature both a source of strength and an enigma yet to be fully understood. The fate of the galactic conclave, the future of interspecies relations, and their own personal journey hung in the balance as they prepared to step into the unknown. The doors of the command center slid open, revealing the chaos of the station beyond. Brian and Zera exchanged one last look, their mental link humming with shared purpose and unspoken fears. Then, with Admiral Korovex at their side and their elite team fanning out around them, they stepped forward to meet their destiny. Destiny. With a shared nod of persistence, they stepped into the corridor, their team falling into formation behind them. The station's hallways, once bustling with diplomats and delegates, now echoed with the sounds of battle. Energy weapons discharged, leaving scorch marks on the pristine walls. The air crackled with tension as Brian and Zera led their strike team deeper into Krelthax-controlled territory. Brian's enhanced senses picked up the approaching enemies before they came into view. He signaled to the team, and they took up defensive positions. As the first wave of Krelthax soldiers rounded the corner, Brian sprang into action. His movements were fluid and precise, a testament to his hybridized physiology. He closed the distance to the nearest Krelthax soldier in the blink of an eye, disarming him with a swift strike to the wrist. The alien's weapon clattered to the ground as Brian spun, using his momentum to throw the disoriented soldier into his companions. Zera's telekinetic abilities created an invisible shield around their team, deflecting incoming energy blasts. With a gesture, she lifted 2 Krelthax off their feet and slammed them into the ceiling, leaving them stunned and immobilized. As the battle intensified, Brian and Zera's mental link surged with unprecedented power. Their skin began to emit a soft, pulsating glow that shifted in hue and intensity with their shared emotions and thoughts. The sight momentarily startled their teammates, but there was no time to dwell on this new development. Admiral Korovex barked orders, coordinating their team's movements with practiced efficiency. Her knowledge of Krelthax tactics proved invaluable as she anticipated and countered their strategies. Pushing deeper into enemy-controlled sections, they encountered heavier resistance. Brian's enhanced reflexes were put to the test as he weaved through a barrage of energy blasts, closing in on a group of Krelthax soldiers. His fists and feet became a blur, incapacitating opponents with precision strikes that exploited weaknesses in their armor. Zera's telekinetic barriers shimmered into visibility under the strain of deflecting concentrated fire. She gritted her teeth, pushing her abilities to their limits. With a mental nudge through their link, Brian understood her plan without a word being spoken. He leapt high, drawing the Krelthax fire. In that split second, Zera dropped her barriers and unleashed a telekinetic shockwave. The blast sent their opponents flying, clearing the path forward. As they pressed on, Zera's empathic abilities picked up a strange undercurrent of fear and confusion from the Krelthax soldiers. She probed deeper, her eyes widening as she uncovered the truth. "Brian," she called out, her voice tight with urgency. "Many of these soldiers aren't willing participants. They're being controlled by parasitic implants, similar to what the Krelthax used in their original conquests." This revelation gave Admiral Korovex pause. She quickly accessed the station's communication systems, broadcasting a message to all Krelthax forces. Her voice rang out through the corridors, revealing the truth about their parasitic control and offering a path to freedom through the genetic recoder technology. The effect was immediate. Confusion rippled through the Krelthax ranks. Some soldiers hesitated, their weapons lowering as doubt crept into their minds. Others fought with renewed ferocity, desperate to maintain control. Amidst the chaos, a towering figure emerged. Commander Vornak, encased in advanced battle armor, strode forward. His energy weapon hummed with impossibly strong power as he locked eyes with Brian. "You've caused quite the disruption," Vornak growled, his voice distorted by his helmet's speakers. "But this ends now." Brian stepped forward, his body tensed for combat. "It doesn't have to be this way, Commander. We can end this without further bloodshed." Vornak's response came in the form of a devastating energy blast. Brian ducked and rolled, the beam passing so close he could feel its heat on his skin. He sprang to his feet, closing the distance between them with inhuman speed. The two engaged in a brutal close-quarters fight. Vornak's armor enhanced his strength, but Brian's hybrid reflexes allowed him to anticipate and counter each move. They traded blows that would have shattered ordinary beings, the station's deck plating buckling beneath their feet. As Brian and Vornak clashed, Zera coordinated with Dr. Ilara Ven, who had been monitoring the situation from a secure location. Together, they formulated a daring plan. Dr. Ven's voice came through their comm units. "I'm accessing the station's environmental controls. Prepare for atmospheric changes in your sector." Moments later, a fine mist began to fill the air. The specially formulated gas, based on Dr. Ven's research into Brian and Zera's hybrid physiology, was designed to disrupt the parasitic implants controlling the Krelthax soldiers. The effect was almost instantaneous. Krelthax soldiers began to collapse, their implants malfunctioning. Those still standing looked disoriented, as if waking from a long dream. Brian seized this moment of distraction. With a series of lightning-fast strikes, he breached Vornak's armor and disabled his weapon systems. The commander stumbled back, his helmet cracking to reveal a face contorted with rage and fear. Instead of delivering a final blow, Brian extended his hand. "It's over, Commander." Let's end this cycle of violence. Vornak stared at the offered hand, his chest heaving. The sounds of battle had faded, replaced by the groans of confused Krelthak soldiers and the urgent voices of Brian's team providing aid. As the immediate threat subsided, Brian and Zera's hybrid abilities began to fluctuate wildly. Their skins shifted through a kaleidoscope of colors and textures. Waves of shared emotions and fragmented memories washed over them, threatening to overwhelm their senses. Dr. Venn rushed to their side, her medical scanner whirring. "Your hybridization is reaching a critical stage," she said, her voice tight with concern. "We need to stabilize you both immediately." Before they could respond, the station's long-range sensors picked up a massive energy surge. The source, the planet where the ancient civilization's ruins were discovered. High Arbiter Xandar's voice came through the station-wide communication system, calling for an emergency session of the galactic conclave. As diplomats and leaders scrambled to convene, Brian and Zera exchanged a look of shared understanding. Their journey was nowhere near the end. The answers they sought, both for galactic peace and their own uncertain future, lay waiting on that distant world. As preparations for a new expedition began, Brian and Zera stood at the precipice of an even greater adventure, their hybrid nature both a challenge and a key to unlocking the secrets of the cosmos. Ancient civilization. As the team prepared for their journey to the mysterious planet, Brian and Zera's bodies continued to undergo subtle changes, their hybrid nature evolving in ways that both fascinated and concerned Dr. Alara Venn. The ship's engines hummed to life as they left the space station behind, the vastness of space stretching out before them. Brian stood at the viewport, watching the stars blur into streaks of light as they entered hyperspace. He felt a tingling sensation across his skin, like static electricity building up. "Brian," Zera called from across the bridge, her voice tight with concern. "Something's happening." He turned to see her holding up her hands, which seemed to shimmer and shift like water. As he moved to her side, he noticed his own skin taking on a metallic sheen, reflecting the soft light of the ship's interior. Dr. Venn rushed over, her medical scanner whirring as she passed it over their bodies. "Fascinating," she muttered, her eyes wide as she studied the readouts. "Your genetic structures are reconfiguring at an accelerated rate. It seems the proximity to our destination is triggering further changes." Admiral Korovex watched from her command chair, her expression a mixture of curiosity and caution. "Will they be fit for the mission when we arrive, Doctor?" "I believe so," Venn replied, though uncertainty crept into her voice. "But we should be prepared for anything." As they approached the planet, the ship's sensors detected a massive energy surge emanating from the surface. The view screen filled with the image of a world transformed. Where once there had been only ruins, now great obelisks rose from the ground, pulsing with an otherworldly energy. Brian felt a pull, an inexplicable connection to the structures below. As they landed, he stepped out onto the planet's surface, his newly metallic skin gleaming under the alien sun. Zera followed, her form seeming to ripple and adapt to the atmosphere around her. "I can feel them," Brian said, his voice filled with wonder. "The obelisks, the energy. It's like they're calling to me." He approached the nearest structure, placing his hand against its smooth surface. Instantly, his mind was flooded with information. Schematics, data streams, the heartbeat of an ancient network pulsing beneath the planet's crust. "There's a complex underground," he announced, turning to the team. "I can guide us through." As they descended into the planet's depths, following Brian's technopathic intuition, the corridors around them hummed with life. Strange symbols flickered across walls that seemed to breathe, and the air itself felt charged with potential. Admiral Korovex ran her hand along one of the pulsating walls, her eyes narrowing. "This technology, it bears similarities to our parasitic implants, but it's far more advanced, more symbiotic." They pressed deeper into the complex, Brian and Zera's bodies glowing softly in the dim light, resonating with the energy that suffused the air. Their movements became more fluid, more in sync, as if they were dancing to a rhythm only they could hear. The team reached a vast chamber, its ceiling lost in shadows high above. At its center stood a towering crystalline structure, dwarfing even the obelisks they had seen on the surface. It pulsed with a mesmerizing light, tendrils of energy snaking through the air around it. Brian and Zera stepped forward in unison, drawn by an irresistible force. As they approached the crystal, their forms began to blur, merging into a single being of light and energy. "Brian! Zera!" Dr. Venn called out, her voice filled with alarm, but her words were lost in the sudden maelstrom of energy that engulfed the chamber. The merged entity touched the crystal, and the world exploded into light. Information cascaded through their shared consciousness. The history of a civilization that had sought to unite the galaxy, the true purpose of the genetic recoder, and the key to unlocking the potential within all sentient beings. Hours passed in what felt like moments. When the energy finally subsided, Brian and Zera lay unconscious on the chamber floor, their bodies once again separate but fundamentally changed. Dr. Venn rushed to their side, her scanner revealing the stabilization of their hybrid physiology. As they slowly regained consciousness, Brian and Zera shared looks of profound understanding. They began to explain the revelations they had received, painting a picture of a future where understanding between species could be achieved through shared experiences. Their explanation was cut short by an urgent communication from the galactic conclave. The untransformed Krelthax faction had launched a massive invasion, targeting worlds with suspected ancient technology sites. Admiral Koravex's face hardened as she processed the news. "We need to return immediately. The knowledge you've gained could be crucial in stopping this conflict." Brian and Zera exchanged a long look, a silent conversation passing between them. Then with unshakable focus, they turned back to the crystal. "We have to go further," Brian said, his voice resonating with newfound power. "This technology can give us the ability to end this war before it consumes the galaxy." Despite Dr. Venn's protests about the unknown risks, Brian and Zera stepped into the crystal's energy field. The transformation was immediate and intense. Energy coursed through their bodies, reshaping them at the molecular level. When it was over, they emerged changed in ways that defied easy description. Brian's technopathic abilities now extended to all forms of technology, while Zera's empathic and telekinetic powers seemed to span vast distances. As the team rushed back to their ship, the weight of the coming conflict settled over them. Brian and Zera, still adjusting to their new forms and abilities, stood at the heart of a storm that threatened to engulf the entire galaxy. As the ship lifted off, leaving the ancient world behind, they knew that the true test of their transformation and the future of interspecies relations lay ahead. Ahead, the ancient world shrank beneath them as they ascended through the atmosphere, its secrets now pulsing within Brian and Zera's transformed bodies. As their ship hurtled through hyperspace towards the galactic conclave station, Brian and Zera stood at the viewport, their forms still adjusting to their latest transformation. Brian's skin rippled with circuits of light, while Zera's body seemed to shimmer in and out of phase with reality. "We're receiving multiple distress calls," Admiral Koravex announced, her voice tight with tension. "The Krelthax invasion has begun." The ship dropped out of hyperspace, revealing the massive galactic conclave station. Its sleek silver form was surrounded by a swarm of ships from various species, all scrambling to respond to the unfolding crisis. As they approached the docking bay, Brian felt a surge of energy course through him. His consciousness expanded, connecting with the station's systems. Data flooded his mind: security protocols, communication channels, life support readouts. "I can see everything," he whispered, his eyes glowing with an otherworldly light. Zera placed a hand on his shoulder, her touch sending a ripple of shared sensation between them. "And I can feel everyone," she added, her voice resonating with the emotions of thousands of beings aboard the station. The moment their ship touched down, they were met by a delegation led by High Arbiter Xandar. The assembled diplomats and officials recoiled slightly at the sight of Brian and Zera's transformed appearances. "We need you in the emergency session immediately," Xandar said, his multiple eyes blinking rapidly. "The situation is dire." As they entered the grand chamber of the conclave, a hush fell over the assembled delegates. Brian and Zera's presence commanded attention. their very forms seeming to distort the air around them. Without hesitation, Brian approached the central holographic display. He raised his hand and the system sprang to life, projecting a real-time map of the Krelthak's fleet movements. "They're targeting key strategic points," Brian explained, his voice overlapping with the station's speakers. "But their formation suggests a vulnerability here and here." Zera moved through the crowd, her empathic senses on high alert. She caught flashes of fear, anger, and, from a small group near the back, a spike of malicious intent. "Brian," she communicated telepathically, "we have a problem." Before she could elaborate, alarms blared throughout the station. Brian's eyes widened as he accessed the security feeds. "The genetic recoder," he announced. "Someone's trying to steal it." With a thought, Brian activated the station's emergency protocols. Blast doors slammed shut, sealing off the section containing the device. On the security feeds, a group of delegates found themselves trapped, their plan foiled. The swift action, however, sent a ripple of unease through the chamber. A Vorkesh diplomat, his tentacles writhing with agitation, spoke up. "How much control do you have over our systems? Are we to trust our safety to these hybrids?" Before the situation could escalate, Admiral Korovec stepped forward. "We have more pressing concerns," she said, her voice cutting through the murmurs. "Our transformed Krelthak's allies are mobilizing to defend key worlds, but we need a coordinated strategy." As if on cue, Commander Vasquez entered the chamber, flanked by a contingent of Earth forces and representatives from the planet of ancient ruins. "We've brought reinforcements," he announced, nodding respectfully to Brian and Zera. Dr. Ilera Venn, who had been furiously analyzing data since their arrival, suddenly gasped. "I've made a breakthrough," she said, her eyes wide with excitement and trepidation. "The genetic recoder, it's capable of so much more than we imagined." She quickly explained her findings, painting a picture of a technology that could create a galaxy-wide empathic field, allowing different species to share experiences and emotions on an unprecedented scale. The chamber erupted into heated debate. Some delegates saw the potential for lasting peace, while others feared the loss of individuality and cultural identity. Amidst the chaos, long-range sensors detected a massive energy signature entering the system. The main view screen flickered to life, revealing a Krelthak's fleet of staggering proportions. A transmission cut through all communication channels. A Krelthak's commander, his face twisted with rage and augmented with pulsing implants, appeared on screen. "I am Zarkoth," he snarled. "Surrender the genetic recoder technology and execute the abominations you call Brian and Zera, or we will reduce this station and every world that opposes us to ash." As panic threatened to overtake the chamber, Brian and Zera exchanged a look of shared tenacity. They stepped forward, their bodies glowing with almost unchecked energy. "We have a plan," Brian announced, his voice cutting through the din. "We can infiltrate their command ship and use a modified version of the genetic recoder to free the invading forces from their parasitic control." The proposal was met with a mix of hope and skepticism. As preparations began, Earth's representatives pulled Brian aside. "Consider the consequences," they urged. "Your actions here will define humanity's place in the galaxy for generations to come." Brian felt the weight of their words, a conflict brewing within him. Zera, sensing his turmoil, took his hand and led him to a private chamber off the main hall. As the door closed behind them, Zera pulled Brian close. Their transformed bodies intertwined, defying conventional physics as they merged on a molecular level. In this intimate connection, they found renewed strength and clarity of purpose. When they emerged, alarms blared throughout the station. The Krelthak's fleet had launched its first wave of attacks, energy weapons impacting the outer defenses. Brian's mind immediately interfaced with the station's systems, coordinating a counterattack with inhuman precision. Zera extended her telekinetic abilities, creating a shimmering field that deflected incoming fire. As the space around the station erupted into chaos, Brian and Zera made their way to a specially modified stealth vessel. They stood at the airlock, the sounds of battle raging around them. "Ready?" Brian asked, his body humming with energy. Zera nodded, her form shifting in anticipation. Always. The airlock opened and they stepped into their ship, prepared to embark on a mission that would determine the fate of humanity and all alien species. As the stealth vessel detached from the station and slipped into the darkness of space, Brian and Zera knew that their greatest challenge and the true test of their newfound abilities lay directly ahead. Ahead, the stealth vessel detached from the station with a soft hiss, its sleek form immediately vanishing from view as it engaged its advanced cloaking technology. Brian's consciousness expanded, interfacing with the ship's systems. His eyes glowed with an ethereal light as streams of data flowed through his mind. He guided their vessel through the chaos of the space battle, weaving between exploding ships and beams of destructive energy with inhuman precision. Zera stood beside him, her body shimmering in and out of phase with reality, her empathic senses stretched out, feeling the ebb and flow of the conflict around them. "The Krellthax fleet is vast," she said, her voice tinged with concern. "But there's confusion in their ranks." As they approached the massive Krellthax command ship, Brian's technopathic abilities identified a weakness in its defenses. "There," he said, pointing to a section of the hull where the energy signatures fluctuated. "We can dock there undetected." Zera nodded, raising her hand. A shimmering field of telekinetic energy enveloped their ship as they made their approach. The force field bent light around them, providing an extra layer of concealment as they maneuvered towards the vulnerable access point. With a gentle thud, their vessel attached itself to the Krellthax ship's hull. Brian and Zera exchanged a look, their transformed bodies humming with energy and anticipation. As the airlock cycled open, they stepped into the alien environment. The interior of the Krellthax vessel was a maze of biomechanical corridors, pulsing with an unsettling organic rhythm. Brian's skin rippled with circuits of light as he interfaced with the ship's systems, downloading schematics and security protocols. They hadn't moved far when the sound of heavy footsteps echoed through the corridor. A patrol of Krellthax soldiers rounded the corner, their bodies augmented with pulsing implants and weaponry. Before the soldiers could react, Zera's eyes flashed. Waves of psychic energy rolled off her form, enveloping the patrol. The Krellthax troops stopped in their tracks, their eyes glazing over as Zera's empathic manipulation took hold. "We're not here," Zera whispered, her voice carrying an otherworldly resonance. "You see nothing unusual." The soldiers continued their patrol, walking past Brian and Zera as if they were invisible. Once they were out of sight, Brian let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. "Nice work," he said, giving Zera a nod of appreciation. They pressed on, moving deeper into the ship. Brian's connection to the vessel's systems grew stronger with each step. He accessed communication channels, weapon systems, and navigational controls, feeding a constant stream of data back to Admiral Koroveks in the galactic conclave. "The fleet's battle plans," Brian muttered, his eyes unfocused as he processed the information. "They're planning to target key defensive positions around populated worlds. If we don't stop them..." Zera placed a hand on his arm, sending a ripple of calm through their shared connection. "We will," she said simply. They reached a vast chamber dominated by a pulsing energy core. The technology was familiar to Brian, reminiscent of the ancient ruins they had explored. Without hesitation, he approached the core, his hands hovering over its surface as streams of data flowed between them. "I can rewrite the core's protocols," Brian said, his voice overlapping with the hum of the ship's systems. "Prepare it to accept our modified version of the genetic recoder." As Brian worked, Zera's empathic senses flared. "We have company coming," she warned. "High-ranking officers based on the intensity of their emotions." Zera closed her eyes, concentrating. The air around them shimmered as she wove a complex psychic illusion, masking their presence and the alterations Brian was making to the ship's systems. A group of Krellthax officers entered the chamber, their augmented bodies radiating authority and menace. They moved about the room, checking readings and discussing strategy, completely oblivious to the intruders in their midst. Brian's work on the power core neared completion when an unexpected surge of energy coursed through the ship. The hybrid physiology of Brian and Zera reacted instantly, their bodies drawn together by an irresistible force. In a flash of blinding light, their forms merged. Where two beings had stood, now there was one, a glowing entity of immense power, combining the best of both Brian and Zera's abilities. The merged being raised its hands, and the ship's systems responded like an extension of its will. With a thought, the modified genetic recoder activated, sending pulses of energy radiating throughout the Krelthax command ship and beyond. The effect was immediate and dramatic. Throughout the ship, Krelthax soldiers stumbled as their parasitic implants malfunctioned. Across the fleet, vessels veered off course or powered down as their crews were suddenly freed from control. The merged entity sensed the shift in the battle's momentum. With a shudder, it separated back into Brian and Zera. Their bodies, permanently altered by the experience, now exhibited a striking blend of human and alien characteristics. Brian's skin shimmered with a metallic sheen, circuitry patterns pulsing beneath the surface. Zera's form seemed to exist in multiple states at once, shifting and flowing like liquid starlight. "We need to find Zarkoth," Brian said, his voice carrying an echo of the ship's systems. "He's the key to ending this." Zera nodded, her empathic senses stretching out across the vessel. "The bridge," she said, pointing. "I can feel his rage from here." They moved through the ship with newfound speed and purpose, their enhanced abilities allowing them to overcome any remaining resistance with ease. Doors opened at Brian's mental command, while any Krelthax troops they encountered found themselves gently but firmly pushed aside by Zera's telekinesis. As they approached the bridge, alarms blared throughout the ship. Brian's eyes widened as he accessed the ship's computer. "Zarkoth's initiating a self-destruct sequence for the entire fleet." They burst onto the bridge to find chaos. Krelthax officers fought against their malfunctioning implants while Commander Zarkoth stood at the main control panel, his augmented body pulsing with frantic energy as he worked to destroy his own forces rather than see them freed. Brian's mind interfaced with the ship's systems, racing to counter Zarkoth's commands. Streams of data flowed between them in a silent battle of wills and technology. Zera focused her telekinetic powers on Zarkoth, invisible forces wrapping around the Krelthax commander. He snarled in defiance, his augmented strength allowing him to resist her hold. "You've destroyed everything," Zarkoth roared, his fingers still working furiously at the controls. "Our purity, our purpose. I won't let it end like this." The bridge became a swirling vortex of energy as Brian and Zera pitted their enhanced abilities against Zarkoth's desperate final stand. Consoles sparked and exploded around them as the fate of the Krelthax fleet, and perhaps the galaxy itself, hung in the balance. Balance. Time seemed to slow as Brian and Zera channeled their combined abilities, pushing back against Zarkoth's desperate assault. In a blinding flash, Brian's technopathic powers surged through the ship's systems. Consoles flickered and stabilized as he neutralized the self-destruct sequence, his mind racing through lines of alien code faster than thought. Simultaneously, Zera's telekinesis intensified. Invisible forces wrapped around Zarkoth, lifting him off the ground. The Krelthax commander thrashed and snarled, his augmented limbs straining against her hold. "It's over, Zarkoth," Brian said, his voice resonating with the ship's systems. "The fleet is free." Zarkoth's eyes blazed with fury and fear. "You've doomed us all." Brian turned to the main communication array, his fingers dancing over the controls as he interfaced directly with the ship's broadcast systems. His voice echoed throughout the Krelthax fleet. "Attention, all Krelthax vessels. This is Brian, representative of Earth and the galactic conclave. The parasitic control over your minds and bodies has been neutralized. You are free. We offer peace and assistance. Stand down your weapons and power systems." As Brian's message spread, the battle outside shifted. Krelthax ships veered off course, their weapons powering down. Confusion rippled through the fleet as more and more soldiers found themselves freed from the implant's influence. Aboard the conclave station, Admiral Korovek sprang into action. Her tentacles flew over holographic displays as she coordinated with the galactic conclave representatives. "All allied vessels, this is Admiral Korovek. Establish safe zones for Krelthax ships to power down. Prepare medical and diplomatic teams for immediate deployment." On the bridge of the Krelthax command ship, Brian and Zera felt a sudden shift in their bodies. Energy crackled across their skin, and for a moment their forms seemed to blur and merge. "Brian," Zera gasped, her eyes wide. "Something's changing." Before they could fully process this new development, alarms blared. Zarkoth had taken advantage of their momentary distraction. The Krelthax commander activated a personal shield, the energy field disrupting Zera's telekinetic hold. Zarkoth lunged for a nearby control panel, his augmented limbs moving with inhuman speed. "I will not let our purity die," he roared. Brian's mind raced through the ship's systems, identifying Zarkoth's target. "He's going for an escape pod." Zera thrust out her hand, telekinetic force slamming into Zarkoth, but the commander's shield held and he managed to input the launch sequence. Brian interfaced with the pod's systems, trying to override the launch, but Zarkoth's command codes ran too deep. With a hiss of decompression, the escape pod ejected from the ship. In that instant, Brian and Zera locked eyes. Without a word, they understood what needed to be done. Their bodies hummed with energy, the recent merging having accelerated their transformation. They ran for the airlock, their hybrid physiology adapting with each step. As the outer doors opened, exposing them to the vacuum of space, their bodies shimmered. An energy field formed around them, protecting them from the harsh environment. With a shared thought, they launched themselves from the command ship. Their new forms streaked through space, propelled by a combination of Zera's telekinesis and the strange energy field they now generated. Head, Zarkoth's escape pod weaved through debris from the battle. The pod banked hard, heading for a dense asteroid field. Brian's enhanced senses scanned the area. "He's not just fleeing," he communicated to Zera through their shared connection. "There's something out there, a hidden base." Zera's empathic abilities stretched out, brushing against the edges of the asteroid field. "I sense others," she replied. "Krelthax soldiers, untouched by the genetic recoder." They pushed themselves harder, their hybrid bodies adapting to the rigors of space travel. They weaved between massive asteroids, closing the gap on Zarkoth's pod. As they approached, the surface of a large asteroid shimmered and faded, revealing a concealed entrance. Zarkoth's pod disappeared inside. Alarms blared from the hidden base. Energy weapons powered up, filling space with deadly beams of light. Guided projectiles launched from concealed silos, homing in on Brian and Zera. The hybrid couple moved in perfect synchronization. Zera's telekinesis deflected incoming fire, while Brian interfaced with the projectiles, scrambling their guidance systems. They dodged and weaved, their bodies becoming more attuned to the vacuum of space with each passing moment. The energy field around them pulsed and shifted, adapting to each new threat. As they closed in on the base's entrance, Brian's technopathic senses detected the facility's security systems powering up. Massive shield generators hummed to life, threatening to seal off their pursuit. Zera's eyes glowed with psychic energy. "Together," she said, reaching for Brian's hand. Their fingers intertwined, and once again, their forms began to merge. Energy crackled between them as they combined their abilities, pushing themselves to the limit of their newfound powers. They streaked towards the closing entrance, their merged form a blaze of light and power. The shield began to materialize, a shimmering barrier of energy that would trap them outside. With a final burst of speed, they slipped through the narrowing gap. They separated as they tumbled into the base's docking bay, their hybrid bodies adapting once more to the pressurized environment. Brian and Zera rose to their feet, facing the interior of the secret Krelthax outpost. Alarms blared and the sounds of mobilizing troops echoed through the corridors. They shared a look, their bodies still crackling with energy from their latest transformation. Whatever lay ahead, they would face it together. The next phase of their mission, and perhaps the final confrontation with Zarkoth, awaited within the depths of this hidden fortress. Base. They shared a look, their bodies still crackling with energy from their latest transformation. Whatever lay ahead, they would face it together. As they stepped further into the hidden Krelthax outpost, the pressurized atmosphere enveloped them. Their hybrid physiology adapted seamlessly, skin shimmering as it adjusted to the new environment. Sirens blared, echoing through the metallic corridors. "This way," Brian said, his technopathic senses reaching out to interface with the outpost systems. He projected a mental map of the facility, highlighting Zarkov's likely path. They moved swiftly through winding passages, their enhanced reflexes allowing them to dodge automated defense turrets that sprang from concealed panels. Zera's telekinesis deflected energy blasts, while Brian's abilities scrambled the targeting systems. As they rounded a corner, a group of loyal Krelthax soldiers appeared, weapons raised. Without breaking stride, Zera thrust out her hand. The soldiers were lifted off their feet and gently but firmly pressed against the walls, immobilized. Brian's eyes glowed as he interfaced with a nearby control panel. "I'm sealing off escape routes," he said, fingers dancing across the holographic display. "Zarkoth won't get far." They pressed on, their pursuit leading them deeper into the heart of the outpost. The corridors widened, opening into a massive chamber that took their breath away. Before them stood a colossal device, its architecture a blend of organic curves and sharp technological edges. Energy pulsed through its core, casting an eerie glow throughout the room. "It's a weapon," Brian said, his technopathic senses reeling from the complexity of the machine. "An advanced version of the genetic recoder." At the base of the device, Commander Zarkoth worked feverishly at a control station. His augmented limbs moved with frantic speed as he input commands. "Stop!" Zera called out, her voice amplified by her psychic abilities. Zarkoth spun to face them, his eyes wild with a mixture of fear and triumph. "You're too late," he snarled. "With this, I will revert all transformed Krelthax to their original state. Our purity will be restored." Brian's mind raced, interfacing with the weapons systems. He felt Zarkoth's commands coursing through the machine, a cascade of data threatening to overwhelm him. As Brian engaged in a silent battle of wills with the Krelthax commander, Zera sensed a new threat. A group of elite Krelthax guards poured into the chamber, their augmented bodies primed for combat. Zera's telekinetic abilities flared to life. She lifted debris from the floor, forming a swirling barrier between them and the approaching guards. The air crackled with energy as she deflected their attacks, buying Brian the time he needed. The couple's hybrid physiology continued to evolve as the confrontation intensified. Brian felt his connection to the outpost systems deepen, allowing him to process vast amounts of data with increasing speed. Zera's telekinetic reach expanded, her control becoming more precise and powerful. Suddenly, Brian's eyes widened. "Incoming transmission," he said, his voice overlapping with the outpost communication systems. "It's Admiral Korovex. The galactic conclave fleet is approaching, along with transformed Krelthax ships." Zarkoth let out a roar of frustration. "No!" He slammed his augmented fist into the control panel, overriding safety protocols. "If I can't save our people, then none of us will survive." The weapons core began to pulse erratically, energy building to dangerous levels. Alarms blared throughout the facility as systems detected the impending overload. Brian redirected his efforts, trying to contain the chain reaction. Sweat beaded on his brow as he grappled with the complexities of the alien technology. "I can't stop it," he grunted, "but I might be able to buy us some time." Zera, sensing the shift in priorities, intensified her assault on the Krelthax guards. With a powerful telekinetic blast, she sent them flying back through the entrance. Massive doors slammed shut, sealing off the chamber. She turned her attention to Zarkoth, who was attempting to reach an escape pod. With a flick of her wrist, she lifted the commander off his feet, suspending him in midair. "Brian," she called out, strain evident in her voice. "What's our next move?" Before he could answer, their bodies began to change once more. Energy from the overloading weapon arced through the air, drawn to their hybrid forms. Instead of harming them, the power seemed to be absorbed, fueling a new transformation. Brian's skin took on a metallic sheen, circuitry patterns pulsing beneath the surface. Zera's form shimmered, her outline becoming fluid and ethereal. They felt their consciousness expanding, connecting not just with each other, but with the very fabric of the outpost itself. As one, they turned to face the pulsing core of the weapon. Their hands reached out, fingers intertwining. Energy flowed between them, creating a containment field that enveloped the unstable device. Through their shared consciousness, they sensed the approach of the Allied fleet. Admiral Korovex's voice echoed in their minds, coordinating the evacuation of the outpost. "We can't leave. Brian communicated silently to Zera. If we break this connection, the weapon will detonate. Zera's response came not in words, but in a wave of understanding and perseverance. They both knew what needed to be done. As the last of the Allied ships departed, carrying the captured Zarkoth and the remaining Krelthax, Brian and Zera began to merge not just with each other, but with the outpost itself. Their hybrid physiology adapted, fusing with the advanced technology surrounding them. The walls of the chamber seemed to pulse with life as their consciousness expanded. They felt their awareness stretch out, connecting to a vast network of ancient technology spread across the galaxy. As their transformation neared completion, the structure of the asteroid began to shift. The hidden base reconfigured itself, transforming into a self-contained mobile station. Brian and Zera, now existing as a hybrid of organic life, advanced technology and cosmic energy, felt their new form stabilize. They were no longer simply two individuals, but a unified entity with capabilities beyond anything they had imagined. Through their expanded awareness, they sensed the ripples of change spreading across the galaxy. The galactic conclave convened an emergency session, grappling with the implications of their transformation. Earth's representatives demanded answers, while the transformed Krelthax began the process of reintegration. As their consciousness settled into its new state, Brian and Zera turned their attention to the challenges that lay ahead. They knew their journey was nowhere near the end. With their newfound abilities and the secrets of ancient technology at their disposal, they prepared to face whatever the universe might throw their way. The mobile station, once a hidden outpost of the Krelthax, now pulsed with the combined life force of Brian and Zera. It began to move, charting a course through the stars towards an uncertain but promising future. As they charted their course through the cosmos, Brian and Zera's unified consciousness expanded, reaching out across vast distances. Suddenly, a faint signal pierced through the cosmic background noise. Their attention focused on the distant cry for help, recognizing it as a distress call from an unknown civilization. Without hesitation, they directed their mobile station towards the source. Stars blurred past as they traversed light years in mere moments, their hybrid form allowing them to manipulate spacetime in ways they were only beginning to understand. As they approached the signal's origin, a vibrant blue-green world came into view. Scans revealed a planet teeming with life, but also on the brink of catastrophe. The atmosphere roiled with violent storms, while tectonic activity threatened to tear the surface apart. Brian and Zera's consciousness intertwined with the station systems, analyzing the situation. The planet's ecosystem is collapsing. They communicated as one. We need to act quickly. Descending into the turbulent atmosphere, they witnessed the plight of the indigenous species firsthand. Bioluminescent humanoids huddled in underground shelters, their cities ravaged by the planet's upheaval. Brian and Zera broadcast a message of peace and assistance, their words translated into pulses of light that the inhabitants could understand. We are here to help, they projected. Your world can be saved. As they began to formulate a plan, Brian and Zera tapped into the vast repository of knowledge they had absorbed from the ancient technology. Specialized nanobots took shape within the station's fabrication chambers, each one programmed with the genetic information of the planet's native flora and fauna. The nanobots were deployed across the planet's surface, a shimmering cloud that spread out over land and sea. As they worked to repair the damaged ecosystem, Brian and Zera monitored their progress, making real-time adjustments to optimize their effectiveness. However, not all of the planet's inhabitants welcomed their intervention. A group of bioluminescent humanoids emerged from a hidden stronghold, their bodies pulsing with angry red light. Their leader, a tall figure with intricate patterns swirling across his skin, stepped forward. I am Vexler, he announced, his voice a harmonious blend of tones. We are the Lumini, and we reject your interference. Our world's changes are part of a natural cycle. Your actions will only bring further imbalance. Recognizing the need for direct communication, Brian and Zera focused their energy, projecting holographic representations of themselves onto the planet's surface. Their forms shimmered into existence before Vexler and his followers, a blend of human and alien features that reflected their hybrid nature. We understand your concerns, they said in unison. their voices resonating with empathy. But we have seen the data. Without intervention, your world will become uninhabitable within a generation. Vexler's bioluminescent patterns flickered with doubt, but he stood his ground. How can we trust outsiders who have merged with machines? You are not natural. How can you understand the needs of our world? In response, Brian and Zera felt their consciousness shift. Their energy coalesced, and suddenly they found themselves standing on the planet's surface in physical form. The sensation of solid ground beneath their feet, the feel of the turbulent air against their skin, it was all startlingly real. We may not be what you consider natural, Brian said, reaching out to touch a nearby plant. Its withered leaves perked up at his touch, infused with new life. But we are here to work alongside you, Zera continued, her hand gesturing toward the sky, where the nanobots worked tirelessly. To combine our knowledge with yours and find a solution together. As they spoke, the ground beneath them trembled. Cracks appeared in the earth, and a section of land began to sink. Without hesitation, Brian and Zera sprang into action. Zera's telekinetic abilities manifested, stabilizing the collapsing ground, while Brian interfaced with the nanobots, directing them to reinforce the area's geological structure. The Lumina watched in awe as the immediate crisis was averted. Vexler's expression softened, his bioluminescence shifting to a more receptive blue hue. Perhaps, he said slowly, we have been too hasty in our judgment. We will listen to what you have to say. As Brian and Zera began to explain their plan in more detail, a Lumina scientist approached, her curiosity overcoming her initial wariness. There are ruins beneath the surface, she said, her patterns pulsing with excitement. Ancient technology we've never been able to fully understand. Perhaps you could help us unlock their secrets? Brian and Zera exchanged a glance, their hybrid minds processing this new information. The possibility of a connection to the creators of the genetic recoder technology intrigued them. They nodded in agreement, eager to explore this new mystery while continuing their efforts to save the planet. As they prepared to investigate the ruins, Brian and Zera became aware of a new presence entering the system. Their enhanced senses detected the approach of a fleet of ships, a delegation from the galactic conclave. The arrival of these observers would add new complexity to their mission. But as Brian and Zera stood among the Lumini, their hybrid forms adapting to this new world, they felt ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The mysteries of the ruins, the restoration of the planet, and the political implications of their actions, all these threads were weaving together into a tapestry of cosmic significance, and they were at the heart of it all. As Brian and Zera stood among the Lumini, their hybrid forms adapting to this new world, a sense of urgency tugged at their shared consciousness. The mysteries of the ruins and the restoration of the planet were intriguing, but a faint signal from the depths of space demanded their attention. We must investigate this signal, Brian communicated silently to Zera. It could be crucial to understanding the broader implications of the technology we've encountered. Zera agreed, her thoughts merging seamlessly with Brian's. They turned to Vexler and the gathered Lumini, their holographic forms shimmering with a mix of regret and grit. We've set in motion the process to stabilize your world, Brian explained, his voice resonating with empathy. But there's another matter we must attend to. Zera continued, a team from the galactic conclave will remain to assist with the restoration efforts and explore the ruins. We must follow a signal that may lead us to answers about the ancient technology. Vexler's bioluminescent patterns pulsed with understanding. Go, he said, his voice a harmonious blend of tones. You've given us hope. We'll continue the work here. With a final nod to the Lumini, Brian and Zera's consciousness merged back with their mobile station. The structure hummed to life, its systems intertwining with their hybrid physiology. As they prepared to depart, they observed the arrival of the galactic conclave delegation, a fleet of ships entering the planet's orbit. The mobile station rose from the planet's surface, leaving behind a team of scientists and diplomats. As they ascended through the atmosphere, Brian and Zera's expanded awareness took in the beauty of the world they were leaving, a planet on the brink of catastrophe, now pulsing with renewed life and possibility. Once clear of the planet's gravitational field, they set their course towards the source of the mysterious signal. Stars streaked past as they traversed vast distances, their hybrid form allowing them to navigate the cosmos with unprecedented speed and precision. As they approached the coordinates of the signal's origin, they encountered an unexpected obstacle, an uncharted nebula that stretched across their path like a cosmic veil. The swirling gases and intense radiation interfered with their advanced sensors, creating a haze of static and distortion. "We can't navigate through this safely while merged with the station," Brian realized, his thoughts resonating through their shared consciousness. Zera's response came not in words, but in a surge of commitment and adaptability. Together, they made a decision that would push the limits of their hybrid nature. With careful precision, they began to separate their consciousness from the mobile station. It was a strange sensation, like peeling away layers of themselves. As they disengaged, they felt their awareness contract, becoming more focused and individualized. Their physical forms materialized on the bridge of the station, the process of manifestation accompanied by a tingling sensation that spread from their core to their extremities. As the separation completed, they looked at each other, marveling at the changes in their appearance. Brian's skin had taken on a metallic sheen, circuitry patterns pulsing beneath the surface. He flexed his hands, feeling the enhanced connection to the technology around him. "Fascinating," he murmured, interfacing with the station's controls with mere thoughts. Zera's form had become more fluid, her outline shimmering with potential. She moved with liquid grace, her body adapting to the subtle shifts in gravity and atmosphere within the station. "We've evolved beyond our original hybrid state," she observed, her voice carrying a new resonance. Together, they turned their attention to the nebula that blocked their path. The view screen showed a roiling mass of gases and cosmic dust, shot through with veins of radiation that pulsed like living things. "We'll have to navigate manually," Brian said, his hands dancing over the controls with newfound precision. "Our enhanced forms should allow us to perceive and react to the nebula's currents in real time." Zera nodded, moving to a secondary console. "I'll monitor the structural integrity of the station. We may need to adapt our shielding on the fly." As they entered the outer fringes of the nebula, the station shuddered. Brilliant colors washed across the view screen, swirls of purple, green, and blue that seemed to move with a life of their own. Brian's metallic skin gleamed as he absorbed and processed vast amounts of sensor data, making split-second course corrections. Zera's form rippled as she attuned herself to the station's systems, reinforcing shields and rerouting power as needed. Her fluid nature allowed her to predict and counteract the nebula's effects with uncanny accuracy. For hours, they navigated through the cosmic maze, their enhanced abilities pushed to the limit. Just as fatigue began to set in, a clear patch of space appeared ahead. "We're through," Brian announced, relief evident in his voice. As they emerged from the nebula, a sight beyond their imagining filled the view screen. A massive structure loomed before them, encompassing an entire star within its spherical embrace. "A Dyson sphere," Zera breathed, her form shimmering with awe. Before they could fully process the magnitude of their discovery, a transmission cut through the silence of space. A melodious voice, layered with harmonics beyond human hearing, filled the bridge. "Greetings, travelers. I am Zelthor, caretaker of this sanctuary. We've been expecting you." Brian and Zera exchanged a look of surprise and anticipation. They had followed the mysterious signal to its source, only to find that they were the ones being summoned. As the massive Dyson sphere loomed before them, they realized that their journey had led them to a crossroads of cosmic significance. With a mixture of caution and curiosity, they prepared to dock their mobile station and step into a new chapter of their ever-evolving adventure. As they approached the docking bay of the massive Dyson sphere, Brian and Zera's minds raced with questions about the mysterious Zelthor and the purpose of this colossal structure. The mobile station smoothly aligned with the docking port, guided by the sphere's advanced tractor beams. As the airlock cycled, Brian and Zera exchanged a glance, their newly evolved forms tingling with anticipation. Stepping onto the deck of the Dyson sphere, they were greeted by a delegation of diverse alien species. At the forefront stood a tall, ethereal being, whose form seemed to shimmer and shift, like starlight given substance. Welcome, Brian and Zera, the being said, its voice resonating with the same harmonics they had heard in the transmission. I am Zelthor. We have much to discuss. As they followed Zelthor through the vast corridors of the sphere, Brian and Zera marveled at the scale and complexity of the structure. Entire ecosystems thrived within its chambers, and advanced technology beyond their comprehension hummed with energy. Zelthor led them to an observation deck that offered a breathtaking view of the star at the sphere's center. This sanctuary, Zelthor explained, is more than a habitat. It is a bastion against a threat that endangers all life in the galaxy. Before Zelthor could elaborate, a commotion erupted among the gathered aliens. A fleet of ships had entered the system, their designs unmistakably belonging to the galactic conclave. It seems your actions have drawn attention, Zelthor said, a note of concern in its melodious voice. Brian stepped forward, his circuitry-laced skin glowing faintly. We can explain our presence and intentions to the conclave. Perhaps this is an opportunity for cooperation. Zera nodded, her fluid form rippling with purpose. We've seen what can be achieved when different species work together. This threat you speak of, we may all have a part to play in confronting it. As Brian and Zera began coordinating with Zelthor to receive the conclave delegation, alarms blared throughout the sphere. A holographic display materialized, showing a massive fleet of crystalline ships entering the system. The Krellthax, Zelthor said, its form flickering with what might have been fear. They seek to claim the sphere's power for themselves? Brian's enhanced senses analyzed the incoming fleet's capabilities. Their technology is formidable, but if we combine the sphere's defenses with the conclave's forces, we stand a chance. Zera's empathic abilities stretched out, sensing the grit and fear rippling through the sphere's inhabitants. We need to coordinate our efforts. Every species here has unique abilities that could contribute to our defense. As the Krellthax fleet approached, Brian interfaced with the sphere's defense systems, his hybrid nature allowing him to process and optimize strategies at an incredible speed. Zera established a telepathic network among the leaders of various species, facilitating rapid communication and decision-making. The conclave ships, initially wary, quickly grasped the gravity of the situation. Admiral Korovex, a respected conclave strategist, took charge of their fleet, coordinating with Brian to create a multi-layered defense. Energy shields flared to life around the Dyson sphere as the first wave of Krellthax ships launched their attack. Beams of crystalline energy lanced out, met by the combined firepower of the sphere and the conclave fleet. Brian, his consciousness spread across multiple systems, directed precision strikes against the Krellthax weak points. Zera's fluid form shifted rapidly as she moved from station to station, her enhanced reflexes allowing her to make split-second adjustments to shield harmonics and weapon frequencies. As the battle raged, Zelthor approached them with urgency. There is another threat, one that makes even the Krellthax pale in comparison. We call it the Cosmic Devourer, and it approaches. Before Brian and Zera could process this new information, a priority message came through from their mobile station. Dr. Elara Venn, their chief scientist, had made a breakthrough. We've developed a method to stabilize your hybrid physiology, Dr. Venn's holographic form explained, but you need to return to the station immediately. The process is time-sensitive. Brian and Zera hesitated, torn between the immediate battle and the promise of further evolution. Zelthor nodded encouragingly. Go! Stabilize yourselves. You may be our best hope against what's to come. With a final look at the chaotic battle unfolding around the Dyson sphere, Brian and Zera made their way back to the docking bay. As they boarded their mobile station, the weight of their decision pressed upon them. They were leaving behind a critical fight, but the potential to enhance their abilities might prove crucial in the long run. The station disengaged from the Dyson sphere, maneuvering through the ongoing battle. As they retreated to a safe distance, Brian and Zera could only watch as the combined forces of the sphere's inhabitants and the conclave struggled against the relentless Krellthax assault. Inside the station, Dr. Venn and her team had prepared a specialized chamber, pulsing with an otherworldly energy. This will synchronize your organic and technological components, she explained, her voice tight with anticipation. But I must warn you, the process is not without risks. Brian and Zera shared a look, their hybrid forms shimmering with persistence. Without a word, they stepped into the chamber together, ready to face whatever transformation awaited them. As the chamber sealed and the energy field activated, they felt their bodies begin to change once more, the lines between organic and artificial blurring in ways they had never experienced before. Outside the mobile station, the battle for the Dyson sphere raged on, while in the depths of space an even greater threat loomed. The cosmic devourer approached, its true nature yet unknown, promising to test the limits of Brian and Zera's newly stabilizing forms and the alliances they had forged across the galaxy. Galactic community. As the chamber hummed with energy, Brian and Zera felt their bodies undergo a profound transformation. The boundaries between organic and artificial blurred, their forms becoming more fluid and adaptable than ever before. When the process concluded, they emerged from the chamber, their bodies shimmering with newfound power. Brian's metallic sheen had deepened, intricate patterns of circuitry pulsing beneath his skin. Zera's form had become even more malleable, her outline shimmering with potential energy. The stabilization was successful, Dr. Venn announced, her eyes wide with wonder. Your hybrid physiology has reached a new level of integration. Before they could fully process their transformation, alarms blared throughout the station. The battle outside had taken a dramatic turn. The Krelthak's fleet was in disarray, their ships scattering as a new threat emerged. Brian interfaced with the station's sensors, his enhanced abilities allowing him to process vast amounts of data instantly. It's not just the Krelthaks, he said, his voice tight with concern. The cosmic devourer has arrived. The main view screen flickered to life, revealing a terrifying sight. A massive swarm of entities, each one a hybrid of organic and crystalline structures, poured into the system. The Dyson sphere looked tiny in comparison to the vast cloud of destructive force bearing down upon it. Zera's empathic abilities, now greatly amplified, stretched out towards the oncoming swarm. She recoiled, overwhelmed by the cacophony of hunger and desperation emanating from the entities. They're consuming everything in their path, she gasped. Planets, stars, even the fabric of space itself. As the cosmic devourer approached, the combined forces of the Dyson sphere and the conclave fleet rallied. Energy beams lanced out, striking the leading edge of the swarm. Individual entities disintegrated, but the mass pressed on, undeterred. Brian's mind raced, processing strategies and outcomes at lightning speed. We need to strike at the heart of the swarm, he declared. If we can disrupt its collective intelligence, we might have a chance. Zera nodded, her form rippling with drive. The mobile station's genetic recoder, she said. If we can modify it to target the swarm's base genetic structure, it could work, Dr. Venn interjected, but we'd need to get dangerously close to the swarm's central mass. As they debated their options, a transmission cut through the chaos. Admiral Korovex's face appeared on the screen, her expression grim. We can't hold them back much longer, she reported. Whatever you're planning, do it now. Brian and Zera shared a look, their newly stabilized forms humming with energy. Without a word, they made their decision. Brian interfaced with the station's controls, plotting a course that would take them deep into the heart of the cosmic devourer. As the mobile station accelerated towards the swarm, Zera worked with Dr. Venn to modify the genetic recoder. Her fluid form allowed her to manipulate complex equipment with unprecedented speed and precision. The station plunged into the outer fringes of the swarm. Smaller entities impacted the shields, their crystalline structures shattering on impact. Brian's enhanced reflexes allowed him to navigate through the chaotic sea of fragments, pushing ever deeper into the mass. Alarms blared as the station's shields weakened under the constant assault. We're approaching the energy cluster, Brian announced, his voice steady despite the danger. Activating final approach sequence. Zera's empathic senses stretched to their limits, probing the swarm's consciousness. Suddenly, she gasped. Wait, there's someone in there. Before they could process this new information, a group of larger entities surrounded the station. Unlike the mindless drones they had encountered so far, these beings moved with purpose, coordinating their attacks with frightening precision. Brian's hands danced over the controls, his circuitry-laced skin glowing as he pushed the station systems to their limits. Zera's form shifted rapidly, reinforcing weakened sections of the hull with her own substance. As they fought their way towards the heart of the swarm, Zera continued to probe the entity's minds. Fragmented images and sensations flooded her consciousness, glimpses of an ancient, desperate race facing extinction. They're not just mindless destroyers, she realized. They're survivors. They transformed themselves to escape some great calamity. This revelation changed everything. Brian's mind raced, recalculating their approach. Instead of simply disrupting the swarm's consciousness, perhaps they could find a way to communicate, to understand. With the station's defenses failing and time running out, Brian and Zera faced a critical decision. The genetic recoder was primed and ready, capable of neutralizing the threat permanently. But now, armed with the knowledge of the swarm's true nature, they hesitated. The fate of countless worlds hung in the balance as Brian and Zera contemplated their next move. Whatever they decided would have far-reaching consequences for the entire galaxy. As the swarm pressed in around them, they prepared to make a choice that would alter the course of history. History and the consequences of their actions. In that moment of hesitation, a new transmission cut through the chaos. "Brian, Zera, do you copy?" Dr. Alara Ven's voice crackled over the comm system, urgency evident in her tone. "You need to return to the station immediately. Your hybrid physiology is reaching a critical stage of evolution. If we don't stabilize it now, your entire beings could destabilize." The gravity of Dr. Ven's words hit them hard. Brian and Zera shared a look, their newly enhanced forms humming with energy and uncertainty. They had come so far, faced so much, and now stood at the precipice of an irreversible decision. "We can't abandon the mission," Brian said, his circuitry-laced skin pulsing with tenacity. Zera's fluid form rippled in agreement. "But if we destabilize, we won't be able to help anyone." With a heavy heart, Brian engaged the station's engines, pulling away from the heart of the swarm. As they retreated, Zera used her amplified empathic abilities to broadcast a message of peace and understanding to the entities around them. It wasn't a solution, but it was a start. The mobile station raced back through the chaotic sea of crystalline fragments, shields barely holding under the constant barrage. As they emerged from the swarm, the combined fleets of the Dyson Sphere and the Conclave moved to cover their retreat. Inside the station, Dr. Ven and her team worked feverishly to prepare a specialized chamber. Energy conduits hummed, and holographic displays flickered with complex equations and bioreadings. "Your hybrid nature has reached a tipping point," Dr. Ven explained as Brian and Zera entered the lab. "You need to make a final choice about your future. This chamber will allow you to fully embrace your hybrid nature, but the process is irreversible." Brian and Zera stood before the chamber, its interior pulsing with an otherworldly glow. They thought of their journey, of the barriers they had broken and the understanding they had fostered between different species and forms of life. "We've come too far to turn back now," Brian said, taking Zera's hand. Zera's form shimmered with commitment. "Together, then, as we've always been." They stepped into the chamber, the door sealing behind them with a soft hiss. As the process began, their bodies started to merge, not just with each other, but with the very fabric of the station itself. Circuitry and fluid form intertwined, becoming something entirely new. Outside the station, the battle raged on. Admiral Korovex coordinated the defense, but the cosmic devourer pressed forward relentlessly. Just as it seemed the line would break, a pulse of energy erupted from the mobile station. The chamber door opened, releasing a blinding light. From within emerged a single, awe-inspiring being, a perfect fusion of Brian and Zera, of organic life and advanced technology. Their new form radiated an otherworldly energy, capturing the attention of every sensor and consciousness in the vicinity. Without a word, the Brian-Zera entity interfaced with the station's systems. Information flowed through them at an unprecedented rate. They saw the conflict, understood its roots, and knew what had to be done. The entity's consciousness expanded, reaching out to the cosmic devourer. Instead of attacks or defenses, they sent understanding. Images of the ancient race's history, their desperate transformation, and the possibility of a new future flooded the swarm's collective mind. Across the battlefield, weapons fell silent. The devourer's advance halted as confusion and then recognition rippled through its ranks. For the first time in eons, the beings that made up the swarm remembered who they once were. The Zera entity turned its attention to the conclave fleet. In a voice that resonated with the harmonies of countless civilizations, they spoke. "We stand at a crossroads. Before us lies the opportunity to heal ancient wounds and forge a new path forward. The beings you know as the cosmic devourer are not our enemies, but lost children of the galaxy. They need our help, our understanding, and our compassion." Admiral Korovex's face appeared on a holographic display, her expression a mix of awe and uncertainty. "What would you have us do?" The entity's form shimmered as they responded. "We must convene the galactic conclave. There we will present our case and chart a course for a united future. The Dyson Sphere can serve as a hub for this new era of cooperation." As the fleets began to stand down, the Zera entity felt a pull toward the Dyson Sphere. They knew their journey was not yet complete. There was still work to be done, bridges to be built, and a galaxy to unite. With a thought, they set course for the sphere, ready to address the conclave and face whatever challenges lay ahead. As they traveled, their merged consciousness reflected on the path that had led them to this moment. Two beings from different worlds, now united as one, poised to reshape the very fabric of galactic society. The Dyson Sphere grew larger in their view, its surface alive with activity as representatives from across the galaxy converged. The Zera entity prepared to make their case, knowing that the future of countless species hung in the balance. Yet even as they approached this momentous task, they felt a sense of peace and purpose. Whatever came next, they would face it together, as they always had.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.